Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where Karen steals all of the Thanksgiving leftovers. Am I the jerk for not wanting to host Christmas after my family stole all of the Thanksgiving leftovers? My husband and I hosted our family for Thanksgiving this year, and we went all out. We made 2 turkeys, a ham, 20 pounds of mashed potatoes, 2 pans of dressing, sweet potato casserole, and the full Thanksgiving menu. My in-laws helped a lot by bringing a ton of desserts, trays of cookies, pies, rolls, and more, which we really appreciated. The evening was wonderful, good food, good drinks, and great company. Later in the evening, when people were getting ready to leave, my husband brought out plastic leftover containers he had bought specifically for the occasion and told everyone to help themselves to some leftovers. He and I then went back to the front room to continue socializing. I was pretty tired at this point and put my feet up until it was time to see everyone out. When I went into the kitchen before heading to bed, I noticed that the food on the island and table had been put away. I assumed everything was sorted and headed to sleep. The next morning, I woke up starving and excited for leftover turkey, mashed potatoes, and gravy. I went to the fridge, only to stand there in shock. It was almost completely empty. All I could find was a bag of turkey wings and half a bag of dressing. Thinking there had to have been a mistake, I checked the fridge in the garage, but it was empty too. I sat there in disbelief, trying to figure out what had happened to all the food. When my husband walked into the kitchen, I asked if he had misunderstood, or if maybe he had offered the leftovers to a relative's charity or something. He said no, but he did mention that he had seen one of our relatives and her entire family carrying out not only the food they had brought, but also unopened desserts from the in-laws and gallon-sized bags filled with the food that we had made. Did I mention that I made 20 pounds of mashed potatoes? I'm all for sharing food and was happy to prepare a meal for everyone to enjoy, and I welcome the idea of reasonable leftovers for people to take home. But to take literally everything, including desserts that were not theirs and a significant portion of the meal we prepared, felt entirely out of bounds. Now I feel hesitant about hosting Christmas because of what I see as greedy and disrespectful behavior. Am I the bad one here? Edit. I've had a day to think about it and received a lot of good advice. I realize now that I should have stayed on the job a bit longer and put aside the food I wanted for my family's meal the next day before letting everyone else dive in. I clocked out too early, and that was my mistake. Some suggested the behavior might not have been malicious. Perhaps they assumed my husband and I were disinterested in keeping leftovers and thought the food was up for grabs. Others even said it could be seen as a compliment to my cooking because it was too irresistible to leave behind. That made me smile a bit. Hearing stories from others who experienced similar or worse situations, like people taking food from funerals or weddings, helped put things into perspective. I think I'll make some adjustments for the future. Next time, I will set aside what I want to keep before letting family help themselves. This way, everyone gets to enjoy the food and my family can still have leftovers the next day. I'm also considering hosting Christmas, but it will likely be more of a potluck situation to help set clear boundaries. Do not host Christmas. Just say, sorry, we spent too much on Thanksgiving, and when everyone took the leftovers, leaving us nothing, I had to go out and buy food for us, which used up my food budget for the month. Merry Christmas. Name and shame, too, if it wasn't everyone. If Aunt Marge and Cousin Fred took reasonable amounts, but Uncle Howard and his family were the real culprits, make sure to say, and when Uncle Howard and his family took all the leftovers, leaving us nothing. Don't spread the blame unless it's warranted. You don't want Aunt Marge feeling weird about her perfectly normal Tupperware of food. Am I the jerk for telling my sister that my wife is not spoiled? Her husband just doesn't like her? I, 34 male, am married to the love of my life, Michelle, who's 31, and we've been together for 13 years, married for 11. My wife is chronically ill, and as soon as it was financially feasible, I suggested she quit her job and stay at home. Since then, I've become quite successful in my career, and I've encouraged her to get out of the house to pursue hobbies that we didn't have the money, time, or energy for in the past. We're incredibly happy with the direction our life is going, and Michelle's mental and physical health has never been better. We divide the household chores based on how Michelle is feeling. On her good days, she often takes care of most of the housework before I even get home. However, on days when her illness is acting up, a lot of the household responsibilities fall on me. Honestly, I do not mind. Our daily tasks are not overwhelming. They mainly include laundry, dishes, cooking, and taking care of our dogs. Additionally, we have a housekeeper who comes once a week to handle most of the major cleaning tasks. I enjoy cleaning, and on the days when Michelle cannot manage much, I typically spend only about an hour doing chores. I also enjoy spoiling Michelle. I bring her home small gifts and surprises. I encourage and financially support her hobbies. I take her on 2 dates every week, and we go on vacations together. I genuinely enjoy seeing her happy and feeling fulfilled. My sister, Karen, cannot seem to wrap her head around this dynamic. Her husband, Bill, works in the same industry as I do and makes a similar amount of money. However, Bill does not treat Karen the way I treat Michelle. Karen often mentions how Bill will not let her be a stay-at-home wife. She has complained about how rarely he takes her on dates, brings her flowers, or surprises her with gifts. She also frequently says that Bill is not generous with his money and that it should be their money. Despite her dissatisfaction with her own situation, Karen constantly criticizes Michelle, claiming that my wife is spoiled. Whenever I mention what Michelle is doing during the day, such as attending a cooking class, golfing, or painting, Karen becomes huffy and makes sarcastic comments about how lucky my wife must feel or how surprised she is that Michelle stays busy. If I mention doing any household chores, Karen jumps on the opportunity to criticize Michelle. She calls her selfish and claims that even small tasks, like cooking breakfast, are the least my wife could do. If I tell my mother about the emerald earrings I bought for Michelle, the spa day I arranged for her, or the new recipe I'm cooking for her, Karen accuses me of being in an unequal relationship and insists that I'm being taken advantage of. Recently, during a family dinner that neither Bill nor Michelle attended, I casually mentioned to my mom that I needed to do a load of laundry after dinner so I would have clean pants for work the next day. Michelle had been having a bad flare-up and had been confined to the couch. Karen scolded and loudly said, "If she was not so spoiled, you would not be coming home to a bunch of chores." I was fed up. I responded, "My wife is not spoiled. Your husband just doesn't like you." And then asked her why she is forced to work when her husband makes as much money as I do. Karen was furious. My parents were irritated and I was asked to leave the dinner. Since then, Karen has sent me texts calling me names, and my mother has reached out saying my comments were insensitive and asking me to apologize. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. It's lovely to see a couple that manages chronic illness so well. She doesn't slack off on her good days, and you accept that she's not slacking off when she feels bad. The fact you two just like making each other happy is delightful to see. Your sister is absolutely jealous and wants to prove your marriage is the weird one so she doesn't have to feel bad about hers. Keep being Gomez to your Morticia. Good man. Not the jerk. Your sister sounds bitter because her husband doesn't treat her with the same love and care you show your wife, and instead of addressing that, she's taking it out on you and Michelle. Honestly, she's projecting her frustrations, and while your comment was spicy, it seemed like it hit a nerve because there's truth to it. She needs to stop comparing her marriage to yours and work on her own issues with Bill. You're just out here loving your wife and doing what works for your relationship. You're the jerk. You said in your own words, "I like to spoil my wife." She is spoiled and in a very privileged position. That does not mean it's wrong, but you should both appreciate it. Your sister is also a jerk for taking her issues and jealousy out on you and your wife. But you also could have been more sensitive and just said, "I am happy and enjoy taking care of my wife. I don't mind doing my own washing." You are also the jerk for bringing up the husband earns as much as you do. Do you have any idea what happens to their money? Maybe it's going to loans, supporting family, debt, etc. Your sister is out of line, but so are you. Am I the jerk for boarding a plane without my sister and leaving her and her kids behind? I, 21 female, am currently going to college in the same town where my sister, who's 27, and her family live. We are about a 6-hour flight away from our hometown where our parents and extended family live. We had planned to fly back to our hometown for Thanksgiving a few days ago. For some background, my brother-in-law, who I will call Bill, is an alcoholic. Any kind of event where alcohol is available ends with him getting into fights and causing issues. He yells and throws things and becomes very aggressive. My sister arrived at the airport before me. When I got to the gate an hour and a half before boarding, Bill was nowhere to be found. My sister was struggling to keep track of her 3 kids and all their luggage. He did not come to check on them even once during the entire hour and a half. I only saw him when he staggered over to the waiting area when it was time to board. As soon as my sister started talking to him, he became loud. I watched from the boarding line as we were in different groups, while the situation escalated to the point where security confronted him. My sister waved me over and I got out of line. She told me they were not going to allow him to fly and that she needed help. I asked if I should take Bill's seat so I could sit next to one of the kids and not leave her alone on a long flight with 3 kids. She looked confused and repeated that Bill would not be flying with us. I asked if she was going to stay behind to deal with his behavior and she said yes. I told her that in that case, I probably couldn't help her. Her kids are all 6 and under, 6, 3, and 9 months old, and they would need their mother. My sister still seemed confused, then told me she expected me to stay behind and help her deal with her husband and kids. I told her no. Traveling around the holidays is crazy, and there likely would not be enough open seats for us to get a later flight, especially if Bill was still not allowed to fly. I was excited to see our family, and her kids were not my responsibility. She became upset and told me she did not know what to do with her husband and that if he couldn't fly or if something worse happened, she would not know how to handle it. I told her it wasn't my problem. Bill is not a kid who needs supervision, and it's not her job to deal with him throwing a tantrum and getting in trouble with security. I suggested that we board the plane and leave him to face the consequences of his own actions. She insisted that he was her responsibility. I replied that if she knew how he behaves when he drinks, she should have done something to prevent this from happening. I told her this situation was entirely on her. She chose to marry him, not me, and I would not miss Thanksgiving with my family because of her husband's problems. I boarded the flight and she stayed behind. My family was happy that I made it, but many of them called me insensitive for what I said. My mom was particularly angry that I did not stay and support my sister. You didn't marry him. He's not your responsibility. Not the jerk. Am I the jerk for getting my roommate's car towed and her parking pass revoked? I, 23 female, share an apartment with 3 roommates, Sarah, who's 22, Jenny, who's 24, and Lucy, who's 20. Our apartment complex is currently dealing with a really frustrating parking situation. Originally, we had 2 garages, the main deck, which was larger, and a smaller second deck. However, the main deck is now under construction, leaving only the smaller deck available. Alternatively, we can park in another lot owned by the same company, but it's 2 blocks away. When we moved in, all 4 of us paid for parking. I even paid extra for the last spot in our designated area so that I wouldn't have to deal with calling people to move their cars when I got home. With the main deck now closed, we are left with 4 designated spots for our apartment. But the layout is problematic. The first 2 spots in our section get blocked in by the second 2 spots, making it crucial to park in a specific arrangement to avoid inconveniencing each other. For the first few weeks after the construction started, we had a system that worked well. Since Jenny and I often left the earliest in the morning and returned the latest at night, Sarah and Lucy would take the first 2 spots, while Jenny and I would park behind them. Recently, Lucy started parking in my spot instead of pulling forward into hers. This meant that when I got home after a long day of work or school, I either had to call Lucy to come down and move her car or park 2 blocks away and walk back to the apartment. I confronted Lucy about this several times, but she always had excuses like being tired, busy, or planning to leave again later. I reminded her repeatedly that I currently work 2 jobs, one of which keeps me out until very late at night, and I need to park at the apartment. While she would apologize and promise to stop, her behavior never changed. The situation dragged on for months. The final straw came when Lucy went home for Thanksgiving and left her car parked in my spot for a week and a half. I had enough, so I went to the complex manager to address the issue. The manager was kind and understanding, saying she would handle it immediately, especially since other tenants had also complained about Lucy's parking habits. The manager ended up towing Lucy's car and revoking her parking pass for the building. Apparently, Lucy had not been following the rules by parking in her designated spot. She was also parking in handicapped spaces and guest spots without a pass and had not even paid for her parking that month. When Lucy returned, she was furious. She screamed at me, called me names, and accused me of trying to ruin her life. She claimed I was trying to get her evicted or even kicked out of college. I apologized and explained that I did not know her car would be towed, but she didn't care. Now she's telling everyone how terrible I am. Jenny and Sarah agree that I did the right thing by reporting Lucy. A few of our mutual friends also think I was justified, but Lucy and a handful of others believe I went too far. They think I'm a major jerk for what happened. Am I the jerk for getting my roommate's car towed? So wait, Lucy would come home, see 2 empty parking spots oriented nose to tail, drive into the first one and just stop, leaving an empty parking spot in front of her? Not the jerk. This is absurd. It doesn't matter how tired Lucy is. It takes exactly the same effort to stop in the first spot versus stop in the second spot. OP. Yes, that's what she was doing. Her parking spot was a little inconvenient since her car would get blocked in, but I was always happy to come move my car if she needed to get out. So basically, she messed around and found out. Seriously, did she think she was going to block your spot for 10 days and you would just walk those 2 blocks every day to and from, not saying a word about it? Between that and parking in handicapped spots, she is deep in the entitlement zone and needs an intervention. Am I the jerk for telling my coworker that vitamins are not a replacement for food? I work in an office with a small team, and during breaks, we often chat about our lives. One of my coworkers, Anna, has been quite vocal recently about how she's too busy to eat and relies on vitamins and supplements instead of actual meals. She'll say things like, "Why bother with lunch when I can just take a multivitamin and drink coffee?" At first, I didn't think much of it because everyone's eating habits are their own business. But lately, I've noticed that Anna looks completely drained. She's been complaining about feeling tired, dealing with constant headaches, and struggling to focus during meetings. It's starting to worry me. During one break, Anna mentioned skipping breakfast and lunch again because vitamins cover everything anyway. I casually said, vitamins can't really replace actual food, right? They're meant to supplement your diet, not replace it entirely. I kept my tone light and conversational, not judgmental, because I genuinely care about her well-being. Anna got really defensive and snapped. I don't need a lecture. I'm fine. I immediately apologized, explaining that I wasn't trying to shame her or dictate how to live her life, but that I was genuinely concerned since she didn't seem like herself lately. She rolled her eyes and walked off. Later, another coworker pulled me aside and said they were worried about Anna too, but didn't want to say anything because she's sensitive about her habits. This made me feel a bit better, but I still wondered if I overstepped. For context, Anna and I are not super close, but we're friendly. I wasn't trying to criticize her. I've struggled with unhealthy habits in the past and know how easy it is to fall into patterns when life gets busy. I thought I was helping by gently pointing it out, but now I feel like I might have embarrassed her. When I mentioned the situation to a friend, they said I was being judgy and acting like I know better than Anna about her health. But another friend said that I did the right thing because it's important to speak up when you see someone who could be putting themselves in a situation like this, even if they don't want to hear it. For additional context, Anna is only 18, while the next youngest person in the office is 26. So, am I the jerk? Should I have just stayed quiet and minded my own business, or was it okay to say something out of concern? Not the jerk. Usually it's best not to comment on someone's diet, but she keeps bringing it up, and it sounds like you are coming from a place of care. My Karen wife won't let my mother come visit us for Christmas. My wife, my mom, and I have a huge point of contention when it comes to visits. We live about a 7-hour plane ride away from my mom, and there hasn't been a single visit in 5 years. My wife and my mom never had a great relationship. It wasn't too terrible, but just very different people, and they get on each other's nerves, so my wife doesn't want her to stay in the house. It makes me sad, but my wife feels the home needs to be a sanctuary, and no one who upsets her should be allowed to stay in her sanctuary, and I chose to support that. Her ideal visit would be my mom staying at a hotel and having designated visiting times. My mom says we can make our rules, but we can't seriously expect her to put her time and effort into traveling to stay at a hotel. I also understand that train of thought. My wife, however, thinks my mom owes it to our kids to make the effort. My mom says my wife is selfish for expecting her to sacrifice her time, effort, and peace of mind just to be treated like a burden. I've told my wife to leave it alone. I called my mom recently to talk, and my wife came over and began making digs about how the kids don't recognize my mom and were asking if I actually have parents. My mom said my wife needed to leave the conversation or she was going to hang up. My wife said it's so sad that my mom won't just come and see her grandkids because she feels entitled to stay in our house. I just snapped and told my wife that she needs to stop acting entitled to my mom's time, energy, the money it would take to visit, and that she's the entitled one. My mom began laughing and my wife looked devastated. I quickly hung up and I tried to talk it out with my wife, but she was furious and said I broke a cardinal rule of marriage by calling her out in front of my mom. I do get that, but I've given her my opinion in private so many times. Oh, there's so much more to this story. Your mom didn't just get relegated to a hotel for nothing. How long does she expect to stay? I've had relatives come visit for 4 to 5 weeks at a time in a small house. After the last visit, I said nope, hotel. The visit ends terribly when it's that long. Having so many adults crammed in a small space for too long isn't pleasant for anyone. I think it's completely reasonable for your wife to ask your mom to stay in a hotel. Visit all day together, but retire to separate places to decompress. I also think it's sad that your mom doesn't come to visit her grandkids. I'm team wife all the way. You're the jerk. My wife feels the home needs to be a sanctuary, and no one who upsets her should be allowed to stay in her sanctuary. This is an eminently reasonable approach. But you are the reason your mom does not see your kids. You could take them and visit her. So your wife is right. You and your mom are not interested enough to make it happen. You're the jerk. Typical mama's boy who refuses to support his wife when it comes to his mama. If I were your wife, this crap would so not fly with me. I'd kick you out in a heartbeat and file for divorce. It doesn't matter what the argument is about. As a good husband, you're supposed to support your wife no matter what. especially when it comes to entitled in-laws like your mother, who honestly sounds insufferable. Is it your mom's house? No. So why should she get to come and stay there whenever she wants against your wife's wishes? Selfish little man babies like you do not deserve to be married, period. Both of my ex-husbands ended up being mama's boys, and look where that got them. Divorced, and both paying me alimony for many years to come. Bottom line, want to keep a beautiful woman? Stop choosing your mom over her. Grow up and be a man. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for accepting my family's Christmas invitation despite my husband being upset? I, female 32, met this wonderful man, Philip, male 36, 2 years ago. We got married 4 months ago. For context, I have a 10-year-old son, Billy, from my previous relationship, and my ex isn't in the picture. I have to admit that Philip's relationship with my family isn't so great. They would disagree on a lot of things. For example, he had an argument with my dad when he said that he was keeping their grandson away from them, but Philip stated he wasn't, and that he couldn't visit with Billy because he had work. I was sick at the time. The latest argument was what made things worse. My mom and sister were discussing natural remedies, they're into this stuff, for my niece, and Philip, he's a pediatrician, called both of them ignorant for not using meds instead, which caused a huge argument and Philip being no longer welcomed at my parents' house. Now, they sent me and Billy an invitation for Christmas, but did not include Philip, which I expected given how strained their relationship has become. I called my mom to confirm that I'll attend, but the minute Philip found out, he went off saying he could not believe I was fine with my family excluding him, and then agreed to go and leave him behind. I told him it's their celebration, and I don't get to decide their guest list for them. And also, I'm not leaving him behind because he did not have any plans for Christmas. He said he thought that we'd automatically celebrate together, the three of us, but now I'm taking Billy away from him as well. I thought that was a bit melodramatic because it's literally just a few hours at my parents' home, but he insisted it was about principle and respect. We had a big argument, and I said that he basically alienated himself by continually picking arguments with my family, and he started ranting, saying it wasn't about the fact that they didn't invite him, but the fact that I was willing to let him spend Christmas alone without me and Billy. We went back and forth on the issue, but did not seem to reach a solution. My parents are used to spending every major holiday with Billy, so you can see how much pressure I'm getting from both sides here. You're the jerk. He's your husband, and he's done nothing wrong. 1. Your dad picked a fight because he had to work and you didn't defend him. 2. You're encouraging your mom to be an idiot and not be knowledgeable on medications and wanting to do natural healing. And when your husband, as a medical professional, stated the facts, you let them be terrible to him. You think it's okay to leave your husband alone on Christmas because they're being horrible to him. And I'd be upset too that you're not doing anything to defend him when he's done nothing wrong. You're taking their side, and in doing so, it shows that you don't care for your husband. Keep this up, and he will leave. Maybe Mom can calm the situation down with some lavender oil. How are you not outraged that your parents left your husband out of the invitation to spend Christmas with them? And how could you possibly contemplate leaving your husband alone at Christmas? Do you actually want to be married to him? You accepted an invitation which excludes him, and you think this is reasonable? You're the jerk. You're the jerk. You're right. You don't get to decide their guest list for them. However, you do get to decide whether or not to spend Christmas with your husband. Every married couple I know would automatically expect to spend Christmas together. Not the jerk. Your husband had no right to talk to your parents like that. He's a fraudster who capitalizes off the pharmaceutical industry. I can't tell you how many so-called doctors have told me that my kids need to be on all that crap. I tell them the same thing every time. God put us on this world thousands of years ago, and we never needed this stuff before. Why the heck would we need it now? Oh yeah, we don't. You just want to line your pockets by taking advantage of me and my family. Son having seizures? Oh, he needs to be on these 3 different medications, which will run you $1,000 a month. Daughter's blood sugar too high? Oh, she needs to be on this and that, which costs $700 a month, and test her glucose every 12 hours. When did people stop trusting in the power of prayer and decide to fall victim to the lies of these fraudsters? I feed my kids natural diets, which consists mostly of fruits and veggies. You'd be surprised how many high-quality fruits and veggies are now sold at the dollar store. Don't believe all the organic nonsense. Any fruits and veggies are 1,000 times better than the crap they feed your kids at school. This is also part of why I homeschool all 6 of my kids. I refuse to allow them to be taught the false, his story that is taught in schools now. I teach my kids the truth of how we got here, what our purpose is, the light work that we were put here to do. I teach them that they are in fact star seeds who are here to change the world. 5 of my 6 kids are indigo children, and 1 is not an indigo, unfortunately. He also doesn't look a thing like his siblings, which really was a disappointment to me. He gets angry every time I tell him that even though he's not special like the others, he can still make a difference in the world. It just won't be as powerful as his siblings. He's the one that doctors told me needs to be on antidepressants, and I tell them every time that no, he doesn't need that. He's just disappointed that he's not an indigo, and he has to accept it. I can tell they look down on me for my beliefs, which is unfortunate since so many are awakening to the light. In truth, love, and light, namaste. And this is why I believe that not everyone out there is cut out to be having kids. You can say that again. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her husband? Please let us know. You spend Christmas with your spouse and your kid. In-laws inviting you but excluding them is way out of line. I don't think Philip's gonna be sticking around with her too much longer. Got fired from a place I was never employed at. So I work at a place where the uniform is a stunningly fashionable red polo with black trim. This occurred at a store where they wear the slimming black with a lime green trim. I'm on my way home from work one winter day and decide to stop by the grocery store. As it is winter, I'm wearing my winter jacket, which is a very vibrant purple, and because it's kind of warm out, it's unzipped to reveal my work shirt. I also have my headphones in, a headband on, and a bright blue shoulder bag, aka I'm clearly a customer. So I'm kneeling down in front of some drinks, pondering which one I want to buy, when this woman starts getting up in my business. I shuffle over, thinking maybe she wants to look at the drinks as well, and start pushing a couple in my basket. Then I hear the dreaded, "Excuse me?" I glance around, hoping she's going at someone else, but to no avail. I look up, pulling out one of my earbuds and say, "Sorry, am I in your way?" Because my parents raised me to be polite. "Where's the coconut oil?" I just blink and shrug. "I don't know, sorry. Over there maybe?" And I point over towards the baking aisle. "What do you mean you don't know? Are you that incompetent at your job?" Well, now I'm ticked off. I clearly don't work there, and for the record, I'm very competent at my job. My job not at this grocery store. "Lady, I don't work here. Go find someone else." "You're wearing a uniform. You have to help me." "For a store down the street, not here. I don't have to help you with anything. Now leave me alone." And I start to walk off. But she screams at me as I'm leaving. "I'm going to report you to your manager." To which my mature self tells her, "Go for it." Now I finish up my shopping and I'm using the self-checkout because between work and this Karen, I've had more social interaction than my introverted self can handle when I hear, "There she is. That's her." I look up to see who's screaming, and lo and behold, there's Karen, and she's dragging this poor sap along with her over to me. "She wouldn't help me. I want her fired." "Ma'am, she doesn't work here." "I don't care. I want her fired anyway. She's useless and rude." "Ma'am, she doesn't work here. She works somewhere else. I literally don't have the authority to fire her." "Are you telling me you're not going to fire her, even though she was rude?" At this point, me and Buddy make eye contact, and a moment of understanding passes, as it does between fellow retail staff, and I give him a small nod, and he sighs. "Very well. Miss, I'm afraid it's just not working out. I'm going to have to let you go." I just nod solemnly. "I understand. I'll be going now then." And I gather up my groceries and go to leave. And Karen just has the biggest grin on her face. And that is the story of how I got fired from a store I never worked at a single day in my life. Edit. To those accusing me of stealing someone else's story, I didn't. These Karens are all over, and this same situation is happening all over. Also, for those saying that Buddy shouldn't have done what he did, he was a trainee, not a manager. Just a poor sap who was suddenly way over his head with a belligerent woman that we both just wanted to go away. Never encourage these idiots. Never let them think they actually got someone fired for crap like this, because they'll just escalate from there. Fussy guest demands discount for lack of parking. I maliciously comply. On sold-out weekends, our already limited parking becomes even more limited. Guest and her husband arrive early evening. Car park is already full, so they park in front of the guest door to check in, blocking other vehicles in. Check-in is non-eventful. I rattle off my spiel and hand the guest her keys. Guest walks off, then stops all of a sudden. As she turns to face me again, I know that she's about to complain about something. We all know the pose. Eyes widen as they ready themselves to plead their case as they point and wiggle their index finger in the air at shoulder height. Game on. Guest: You need more parking spots. There's not enough for 40 rooms. Your car park is already full. I reserved a space. Me: I'm sorry, ma'am, but our parking is on a first-come, first-served basis. We do not reserve spaces. If the car park is full, all of the on-street parking is free. Her: Well, there should be 40 spaces for all 40 rooms. Side note, we have 12 spaces at the front of our property, which stretches from the street to our front entrance. Local council regulations state that we only need 1 space per 4 rooms. We beat the regulations by 2. Me: I understand your frustrations, Mrs. Nitpicker, but our plans to construct an underground parking garage have been delayed due to lockdown-induced shovel shortage. Not a shovel to be found within 100 kilometers. It should be dug out and fully operational by the time our city hosts the Olympics in 2032, though. Her: You should extend your car park until then, so every room has an assigned space. I think we should be given a discount for no parking. Me: The owner did consider just knocking this place down completely and making it into a public car park, but then he realized that we would have no rooms left for our guests, which would lower our property rating. So we decided to keep things as they are for the time being. Her: And the discount I asked for? I type away furiously, while umming and ahhing for dramatic effect. Me: I've applied the discount to your folio. I've calculated the total amount it will cost you to park on the street for your 7-day stay and have deducted that amount from your bill. Is there anything else I can help you with, ma'am? Her: Huffs and gives me a smug smile. Well, I should think so. Guest walks off. As I stated earlier, street parking is free 24/7. Her total discount was $0. She never even noticed. Update to my nephew stealing cans from my shed. To recap, as many previous readers know, my nephew stole a ton of cans from my shed after breaking into it and cashed them in at the bottle drop for about $200. My sister and brother-in-law acted like I was a jerk for wanting the money back for the cans and damages. I ended up pressing charges because they refused to pay, and things turned pretty ugly. I filed a small claims lawsuit, and they had to pay me back for the cost of damages, theft, emotional damages for constant harassment, and the cost of the lawsuit itself, all adding up to $500, which finally made my sister and brother-in-law raise a white flag and actually start parenting their kids. My nephews got all of their privileges taken away and were forced by a judge to work community service, which they hated and had to be forced just to complete. They didn't get more than 100 hours each because I had been repaid by their parents when we settled out of court. So the judge pretty much fast-tracked the case. The nephews ended up picking up garbage and doing work around several local parks. And the man directing them, I heard, was a retired drill sergeant, so they had no fun whatsoever. My eldest nephew constantly showed his issues with authority and got into screaming matches with everyone who told him to work. His father had to be called over just to make the boy pick up a rake. The kid openly blamed me for his predicament, and his brothers were both initially on his side. But after a while, they realized that he's just crazy and entitled, and they no longer wanted any part of it. So my 2 younger nephews stopped following his lead because it finally clicked just how in the wrong they were. Problem is that my sister and brother-in-law blamed me for the divide in their family, which didn't end well for them as no one in the family was on their side about it. Everything was put on them and their bad parenting, and without me to blame, they just became silent and bitter. Half the family doesn't want to associate with them now, and their own kids are divided because the eldest refuses to change. It got so bad that my eldest nephew resorted to something so incredibly dumb that you're not going to want to believe it. In the middle of the night, he snuck out and assaulted my house with a pair of his dad's claw hammers. I say a pair because he literally had one in each hand. The first thing he did was start smashing the new lock on my shed, and it didn't break. But he heavily damaged it to the point it was no longer usable, and I had to later remove it with a bolt cutter. He also did a lot of damage to the shed door with the hammer claws. I awoke to the sounds of the hammers and called the police after peeking out of my bedroom window and seeing someone outside hitting the shed. Though I didn't realize it was him at first because he had his face covered with a creepy-looking mask. He saw the bedroom lights come on and chucked one of the hammers through my window. There was broken glass everywhere, and I'm lucky I didn't cut my feet on any of it because I was barefoot. Then my nephew started beating on my back door with the remaining hammer. He did major damage, breaking the knob and the window on the door, and also tore into the door itself with the hammer claw. I was worried the door wouldn't hold out, so I yelled the police were on their way, and he took off before they arrived. The night vision on my cameras showed that it was him. He had a mask on, but he was wearing his school hoodie, as well as his Nike shoes that were also pretty identifiable since his brothers don't have a pair like them. His fingerprints were also on the hammer he threw at my window. My nephews had already all been fingerprinted when they were arrested the first time, so police matched the ones on the hammer to him. When the cops came for my eldest nephew, he obviously denied it was him, but there's no one else it could have been. The other hammer was found in his room, along with the clothes and the mask that he wore, all of which were taken as evidence. The mask was of a Star Wars character I was told is called the Grand Inquisitor. This time, though, his parents did nothing to try and protect him. And they didn't try to pass the blame on me either. They just let their son be taken away screaming. I wasn't there to see the arrest, but I was told by my sister that my eldest nephew was switching back and forth from crying that he didn't do anything wrong to screaming that it was all my fault and he had to get back at me. The boy had to go through a serious mental evaluation and was found to be potentially bipolar. Doesn't really excuse what he did though. Later on, when he was properly diagnosed as bipolar, he started blaming everything he did wrong on that and acted like he should be vilified just for getting treatment for it. But he ended up having a month-long stint in juvenile hall. They got my nephew properly medicated and he pleaded guilty to forego court again in exchange for more community service and mandatory counseling, as well as probation this time. His dad came to my house and personally replaced the window and the door, though he barely said a word to me while doing it. My two younger nephews are still excluding their older brother from pretty much everything, and he still hasn't apologized for attacking my home either. He's also unfortunately repeating a school year because of how badly his grades tanked, which his parents are still very unhappy about. My two younger nephews dropped by on their own in July to personally apologize to me. They said that they always just followed their brother's lead and he made everything they were doing seem so fun, but the punishments for the crimes are not worth the kind of fun they were having, and they don't want to do it with him anymore. They want their fun uncle back and asked if we could start over. I said we can, but they'll have to earn back my trust, which they happily agreed to. My eldest nephew had his 17th birthday a few months ago and basically got nothing, not even a cake. It was part of his punishment for what he had done. I can only imagine how much money he's cost his parents in the past year alone. He led his brothers to steal from me and then destroyed my bedroom window and back door. I imagine in total, with the lawsuit I'd previously filed and replacing the door and the window cost them over $1,000. Doors and windows are not cheap. Meanwhile, my youngest nephew had his birthday a month after that and got a new mountain bike among his gifts. This really upset my eldest nephew and he slashed the tires on the bike, which landed him in even more trouble. I know a thing or two about fixing bikes, so I went out and bought new tubes and tires for the bike and put them on it. So the bike is fine, and my nephew thanked me a lot for fixing it. My eldest nephew resorted to trying to run away because he wasn't being enabled anymore. He just walked out, got on his bike with a backpack full of stuff, and rode off. His parents quickly reported him missing because he left a goodbye letter that basically blamed me and his bipolar for all his problems. In the letter, he stated that he can't wait till he's 18 to get away from all of us. So he was doing us a favor by getting rid of himself sooner. But he came back 3 days later without his bike or backpack and looking beat up. He wouldn't tell anyone what happened. We still don't know, but he was chewed out for continuously using me as a scapegoat for his personal issues because blaming me was the first thing he did after he got back. I didn't make him steal from me. I didn't make him attack my house. I didn't make him run away. That was all him. And he nearly ended up back in juvie for running off because he violated his probation. But he got off easy somehow. Currently, he spends his days pretty much in his room when not in school or doing chores or going to counseling. He finished his community service, but his probation will last until he's 18. He got some lenience for being diagnosed as bipolar, but it couldn't get him off the hook. And believe me, he tried many times. Once they told him what was wrong with him, it became his excuse for everything. But plenty of people go their whole lives with that same mental condition and never do the kinds of things he did. I've been mending things with my two younger nephews, but I don't want to be around the eldest at all, and the feeling is clearly mutual on his part. I've only seen him once in person the past few months, and he glared at me with more hate than I've ever seen from anyone before stomping away. He can't paint me as the villain anymore without being called out on it, so there isn't much he can do other than just try and get through this. For the most part, he's totally shut down since school started. I'm told he barely speaks, even at school. My other nephews tell me he's getting laughed at and ostracized, which I don't think is going to help him get better. My sister and brother-in-law are also not on their best terms with me right now as well, but they can't exactly put any blame on me either. They know it was all on them and their bad parenting. I basically forced them to be more active in their kids' lives, which they should have been doing already. They complain a lot about being tired from work and keeping an eye on their kids, so whenever we talk as of late, it's always awkward and forced. They don't come to my house or me to theirs, but we do see each other at my parents' house, and our mother demands we be civil there, which I have no problem with. My two younger nephews have regained most of their privileges. They got their TV and video games back, but my eldest nephew isn't allowed on them at all. I'm told he's got some electronic entertainment in his room, but what kind? I don't know. I just know he spends most of his time in there unless he has to be somewhere else. My eldest nephew is also not welcome pretty much anywhere in the family anymore. I've recently heard from my parents that they don't even want to see him on Thanksgiving or Christmas Eve this year because they're sick of his behavior and petty thievery. I guess I can understand that, but even I feel it's a bit harsh. My sister and brother-in-law do as well because they're threatening to boycott if he can't come to either holiday. I can't stand that kid and would not want him in my house either, so I can understand why they've made that decision. But I don't think excluding him from everything and everyone is going to make him better. It's going to take a long time for my eldest nephew to mend bridges, if they can even be mended at all. The way things stand, he may try running off again once he's of age, unless the last time scared him too much to try it again. But hopefully things will get better for him in time, if it's not too late to fix his behavior. I may not seem like it, but he's still my nephew and I care, but I'm kind of powerless to do anything. So for now, the most I can do is just keep my nose out of it and offer support where I can. Don't touch anything that isn't on the schedule. Okay, a little bit of context. I work in a manufacturing plant for a multinational company producing microchips. I'm the shift lead engineer on night shift for the front end of the week, Sunday through Wednesday. So there's very little oversight from management except when I see them in the morning on my way out the door. The machines we work on are huge, think Greyhound bus size, and require fairly strategic planning to get the most we can out of them. In recent months, the day shift team has been slacking on their scheduled maintenance items. Normally, this isn't a big deal since we are understaffed, just like every other company in America right now, and we pick up the slack where we can on night shift. The machines run 24 hours a day, so if you have to pass work to the incoming shift, it isn't an issue, and everyone tends to help out everyone. The problem comes in when day shift or the other end of the week move scheduled maintenance off of their shift, but don't move it into our scheduled work calendar. When the machines reach their critical threshold, they shut themselves down until the work is performed. This is normally at midnight on days I'm working. Well, as it happens, this has been occurring more and more over the past few weeks, and I've been letting my senior manager know that's why we've been seeing an availability drop, not from our lack of effort. He's a newer senior manager, so I tried to explain the critical thresholds to him and how we need to at least keep the calendar accurate so we don't have any surprises by machines shutting themselves down unexpectedly. He didn't really seem to want to listen to this and brushed me off, telling me, "If it isn't on the calendar, don't work on that machine." Cue malicious compliance. On Sunday night when I get into work, the schedule is completely empty, not uncommon for weekends. But wouldn't you know it, 3 maintenance items had been moved from the back end of the week and were never rescheduled. So at midnight, 3 machines shut themselves down for maintenance. But I've been told if it isn't on the calendar, I can't touch those machines. I walk up to the production floor and tell all my technicians that we won't be working on any of those machines as they aren't scheduled for us to complete. And per the area senior manager, we don't touch anything unless it's on the calendar. They've been getting more and more frustrated recently with this, so their eyes light up as I tell them we won't be completing any of the work. Then comes Monday morning. I tell the incoming shift and my direct manager about the machines, and they have a good laugh about the situation. It's only roughly 2 hours of work per machine, so I didn't completely do over the day shift. And then I run into my senior manager on my way out the door and casually let him know we have 3 machines that have been down for 6 hours and need to be added to the schedule so somebody can start working on them. His eyes just about pop out of his head and he says, "How could you let 3 machines sit down for half the night and not even start on them? Were there other machines down that stopped you from getting to them?" And I responded with, "Nope, you just told me if it isn't on the calendar, don't touch it." His face went beet red and I saw the vein on his temple start throbbing, but he knew I was right. Since then, the calendar has been pretty dang accurate, and if I see a tool going critical, he's now informed me that I'm allowed to work on it to keep the product flowing. If you want to sit around, you can do it from home. This isn't my tale, but one of a friend of mine, Craig. This took place about 10 years ago. He worked for an IT company maintaining the mainframe and other technical needs throughout the building along with electrical safety checks. He was a bit OCD, and this helped him by being on top of things that were needing sorted. He had custom spreadsheets documenting the last 10 years of repairs on everything he was responsible for. This sheet, by the 5-year mark, had already given him a fairly good idea of what items were likely to fail, either due to updates or physical parts failing due to the 24-hour running of the system. There was a period of a week where he was ahead and decided to get ahead of his upcoming repairs, checking the items and replacing what needed to be done. 2 weeks later, he was sitting in his office when the VP arrived, and on the rounds, she noticed that all 3 times she passed, he was sitting idle in his office. Outraged he was being paid for doing nothing, she had his boss pull him up. "Boss, VP noticed you haven't done much today and pulled your work log for the last few weeks. You've only logged 4 jobs in 2 weeks. Craig, I've been ahead for the last couple weeks, just knocking off jobs before they came up to make time for the bigger jobs that are about to come up next week. Boss, well, you're paid to work, not sit about. If you want to sit about, do it at home. Craig, shrugging internally. Well, I've got some holiday time to take. If you give me a week to organize the cover and take care of the large jobs, I'll take time off. Boss, deal. Off you go. Enjoy your holiday. Craig, but what about the work next week? Boss, no buts. You're on holiday. Effectively immediately. I'll clear it up with HR. Now off you go. Cue malicious compliance. Craig decided to not try and reiterate just how much work was due next week and went on holiday for 2 weeks, turning his work phone off. In that 2 weeks, due to a lack of warning, the tech from another center that usually covered wasn't available. At the same time, there were safety issues, software updates, and other minor issues that were expected, not to mention the dozens of unexpected issues that came up. When Monday after his holiday came up, he turned his phone on to find 20+ texts. His phone inbox was full of voicemails, and he had dozens of emails from panicking management. He got into work and was set upon. "Where have you been? We needed you. XYZ all failed while you were gone, and we didn't have cover." Craig smiled and reminded his boss about the conversation 2 weeks prior, and also had a coworker that overheard the entire thing back him up. After that, not a single manager dared to question his slow week, not even the VP. Challenge accepted, challenge won. Karen demands Christmas dessert samples. Context. For every holiday, my mother would ask the women in the family, my sisters, sister-in-law, my wife, my female cousins, to send samples of the desserts they planned to bring to the celebration for testing and to see if these desserts could make it to the food menu. My wife has been complaining about my mother deliberately rejecting every dessert sample she sent. So many times, my mother has told her that she's being honest and keeping the guests' best interests at heart. Yet, my wife still thought that my mother was deliberately excluding her since 2 of her dessert samples were rejected before. For this year's Christmas, my mother is doing the same thing, but this time, she told every woman who's participating to make a cookie sample and send it to her for testing. My wife took it as a challenge, and to be honest, she worked really hard to make a good sample and sent it to my mother days ago. and the results just came in yesterday. I came home from work and found my wife upset. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me that my mother rejected the sample she sent and decided to exclude her from baking from the menu list and the menu for Christmas this year. I didn't know what to say, but then she told me that she was backing out of the invitation to attend Christmas with my family. I was stunned when I heard her make this statement. I tried to talk to her, but she said it was done. I called her unreasonable to decide to bail on the whole family over some cookie sample. That's just crazy and quite unreasonable. We had a full-on argument about it, and she stated that my mother caused this, but I told her that my mother is pretty serious and careful about the food she offers to the guests, since we are going to have relatives coming from all sides of the country. She told me to stop mentioning it. Later, I heard her cry, despite telling her that her baking is amazing and people have preferences, that's all. Am I the jerk for insisting that her decision was unreasonable? Info. If you're asking whose cookie sample made it to the menu, the answer is my sister and my 2 cousins. Info. A few things to put on here. 1. My wife wasn't the only one whose sample was rejected. We have sister-in-laws, my brother's wife, and my younger sisters. My mother did not force anyone to participate. It was up to whoever wanted to take part. 3. This is just about the dessert, since my mother tends to be very careful in this category. But for other types of foods, dishes, appetizers, salads, stuff like that, it's all welcome, as she stated. Update. Great. So I just got off the phone with my brother, and he told me that his wife is doing the same thing as my wife, and that she has decided to back out of the invitation to spend Christmas with family as well. Turns out my wife must have told her about her decision, and she decided to follow her lead. My brother is upset, saying my wife is encouraging his wife to do this. I see that the problem has just gotten bigger now. Who knows? My younger sister might join in and decide not to go as well. I don't know how this got out of control so quickly. I guess we'll try to have a discussion with my mother about this and see how it goes. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but for years and years, your mother has demanded that all the women, why not the men too, in your family send in samples. For years and years, your wife has tried her hardest to appease your mother, had pushed herself to the limit, and has been left completely and utterly demoralized each and every time by a humiliating tradition enforced by the holiday tyrant. And, even worse, her shame was publicly put on display each and every year, as other family members would no doubt notice that, once again, her food was not chosen. Finally, after producing something she was unbelievably proud of, she was once again left embarrassed and most likely deeply hurt, as she was deemed not good enough for yet another year. This is the straw that broke the camel's back, and she decides she's had enough of her humiliation, and that she will not give her cruel mother-in-law the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort on such a big day. She makes a boundary that many would have made a long time prior, and her husband tells her she's unreasonable for setting up boundaries? Dude, come on. You know you're the jerk. You're the jerk. I'd never in a million years bake samples to be approved. I'm showing up with my food. Eat it or not, I really don't care. Your mom is the jerk and very, very weird. You're the jerk. Your mom is also a jerk who takes samples in and makes others feel bad because of their cooking. This tradition sucks, and I get why OP's wife doesn't want to go. Not the jerk. Did y'all read it all? Yes, she asks all the women, but it's always a yes or no thing. You either want to or you don't. Simple. This only happens in the dessert category, and you can bring whatever for any other category. She doesn't care. This idea is good because it saves the wife from even greater humiliation when she says it's good, but it's not, and she brings it to the function and no one eats it. If her food isn't good, why should everyone be forced to eat it? She can literally bring something else that isn't dessert. The mother is being honest and not biased because obviously other people were not chosen. Like, I've been to so many functions, and there's always that one plate of utter rubbish, and my mother would tell us to always try it, so the owner of the plate doesn't feel bad. Not the jerk. And your wife should stop sending samples. Your wife is married to you, not your mom. And you cannot get mad if she stops sending samples either, because it's clearly a waste of time since it's likely going to be like the same 2 to 4 family members. Keep it real. You know this. I understand the pride because she wants to feel included, but it's been 3 times and it's a blow mentally. Definitely get your wife an extravagant gift for Christmas and let it be known it's for all the delicious cookies she's giving you all year long. Cookies like love, care, passion, etc. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP and his mom or his wife? Please let us know. Just let people bring what they want. His mom's really overcomplicating this. Am I the jerk for telling my dad that I'll gladly spend Christmas with him if he gives me back my college fund as a Christmas gift? To make this brief, I, male 32, had issues with my dad after my mom passed and my stepmom came along. I hated a lot of decisions that were made, but what has left a long-lasting impact was taking my college fund to pay for my stepbrother's surgeries. Unfortunately, he's passed on. He passed last year at the age of 16 from a chronic heart problem. I keep my distance, but still see my grandparents and uncles and aunts, cousins, etc. With the holiday season coming up, Dad started talking to me through some relatives, close relatives. He went on about his overwhelming feelings of loneliness, his upcoming divorce, and invited me to spend Christmas with him because he's alone and heartbroken. As a response, I told him I'll gladly spend Christmas with him if he gives back my college fund in a form of a Christmas gift. He and the others didn't like my response. He thought this was harsh, and my relatives said that I was a judgmental, petty, greedy jerk to say this to him after he's lost so much. They said he did all he could to save his stepson, my stepbrother, which they described as noble and that he doesn't owe me a thing. I went home after a big argument with my uncle who came at me for what I said. Now I feel like crap. Maybe I should have just calmly, politely declined the invitation and not said this to him and made him feel guilty for how he handled my stepbrother's situation. Edit. I just took a look and I see that I'm getting a ton of comments here. To answer a few questions. 1. The fund was made by my dad. Mom was a stay-at-home mom and didn't work, but they both agreed that this fund would go towards my education. 2. I was able to get in college. I started working to pay my way and had some relatives help, but my uncle did so much for me, which is why I said I felt bad when he berated me. He holds a special place in my life, and he's the last person I want to disappoint or let down. Edit 2. Okay, for those who are saying the fund wasn't mine, whose fund was it then? I really don't get this. Maybe you can expand on how exactly the fund wasn't mine and to whom it belonged. Also, for those that think I'm being cruel to my dad after he lost so much, I try not to go out of my way to be mean or malicious. Matter of fact, I want little to nothing to do with him, but all this time, I've been playing nice to please my uncle and relatives, but that's it. Info. Where did the money in the college fund come from? Was any of it from your late mother? Because if it was 100% of your dad's money, that's very different than if he spent money your late mother set aside for her own kid's education on his new stepkid. Regardless, I think the problem is that your dad didn't prioritize you until he was lonely and now he wants your company. The college fund is a symptom of that, and it's not fair for dad to brush it under the rug. Edit, because people are misunderstanding. I'm not saying a stay-at-home mom doesn't contribute. Knowing this information, I believe that half of whatever was saved during OP's mother's lifetime was her contribution and should not have been spent by his dad. What I meant to get at with my question was to see if it was money that dad had saved up after mom's passing, for example. This is such a difficult situation. I do feel for OP, but I also understand dad's position, and I'd hope that OP eventually finds it in his heart to forgive dad. But honestly, if this is happening in the USA, then this country's horrendous healthcare and higher education systems are 100% at fault. They leave folks with debt and bankruptcy, and often with impossible choices to make. I'm so sorry for OP and his dad. No jerks here. Yeah, I can't get on board with OP's line of thinking about the college fund. Was his father supposed to let his stepson pass so OP can go to college and be debt-free? Not even a close choice for OP's father, in my opinion. I'm hoping OP is just young, and one day he'll see how difficult the situation was. Not the jerk. I don't understand these "you're the jerk" comments. There was a college fund in place, and it was used for someone other than you. Definitely not the jerk. Dad used the college fund to try to save someone's life. That's not a jerk move, it's a desperate father move. Like someone else said in another comment, Dad prioritized issues, not the kids. And he was the one that set up the fund. He did not use any inheritance left by OP's mom. Sorry, OP, but you're the jerk. I'm going to get hate for saying this. I'm shocked at how many people will say people don't have to split or give a college fund to a step-sibling, but will tell you that you're the jerk for being upset. Your step-sibling had 2 parents, you had 1. That parent took from your figure and prioritized his wife's kid and hung you out to dry. Would it have been nice to give them the money to save your step-sibling? Maybe, but that's not the question. Your parents or dad set aside money for you, and then your dad and stepmom used it on someone else. Your dad is a complete jerk to prioritize another kid over his own. Once it's set aside for your education, it's no longer his money to take back and definitely wasn't your stepmom's to use. Your dad's bad decisions are coming back to bite him. Now he's lonely because of his decisions, and I don't blame you for telling your dad exactly what he needs to do now to have you back in his life. Not the jerk. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his dad? Please let us know. I think what parents should do is not tell their kids about the college fund until it's time to spend it. That way, if an emergency comes up and they have to use part of it, their kid won't get mad at them. Stepdad is demanding I help my stepsister buy a house. I'm 29, female. When I was about 10, my mom married my stepfather. I have an older brother, Luke, who was 15. My stepfather had Amy and Ada, who were 12 and 11. We didn't come from a privileged background. My mom was a minimum wage worker and my dad was absent. Our stepfather had a very good income. Their deal was that they wouldn't combine finances and they would each contribute equally to the household, and then each takes care of their kids with their spare money. So my mom never had anything for us, and my stepfather was spending big on his kids. This included holidays, which Luke and I were excluded from. Stepfather would pay for mom, but not for us. Luke and I also shared a room, even though Amy and Ada had their own rooms, and we had a guest room. Because stepfather insisted that he was paying more towards the house, so my mom's share would only get her one room for the kids. Luke and I were constantly teased for this situation by the three of them as we grew up. My mom always said that we should be thankful because if it wasn't for our stepfather, we would not be living in a nice home in a good neighborhood. Anyway, Luke and I became determined to be able to take care of ourselves so that we wouldn't need to take nonsense from anyone. We've both done quite well with our careers and finances, and we are in very good shape. Since turning 18 and moving out, my relationship with the three of them has been very limited. I wouldn't call us friends, but we can exist peacefully if we are in the same place. I visited my mom recently, and my stepfather mentioned that Amy wants to buy a house now that she's pregnant. He asked me if I'm able to help out a little with the deposit. The house is £500,000, and she needs at least £150,000 deposit. She has $100,000 so far, $25,000 on her own, $25,000 from her mom, and $50,000 from her stepfather. He was asking if Luke and I can help cover the extra $50,000, and he said he'd pay us back as part of the inheritance eventually. I said no. He insisted that Luke and I both own our houses outright and with our incomes, so we should be able to help. I said whether I can or not is irrelevant. My answer is no. He reminded me that Luke and I each gave £10,000 to our cousin for buying a house as a gift. Amy is my sister, and he's offering to pay us back. I said that was our choice then. This is my choice now. He insisted that we should be willing to help out our family if we're able to. I replied back, like how you helped me and Luke when we were kids? Everyone just went quiet when I said this. After a while, he said if we went back in time, he'd have done things differently, treated all four of us equally. I said that's good of you, but doesn't make you entitled to my money now. He said he knows he's not entitled. That's why he's asking and promising to pay it back. I said the answer is still no, not entitled to a loan either. My mom later told me I could have turned him down without being a jerk or bringing up childhood, which he already feels guilty about. Am I the jerk? Absolutely not the jerk. And I think you did turn him down without bringing up your childhood, but he kept pressuring you, so it's totally understandable that you told the truth. OP. Exactly. I only brought up our childhood after he tried to guilt me about how we're family and should help each other. Initially, it was just a simple rejection. I don't think he feels guilty. He only regrets treating you guys badly now that you and Luke have turned out successful. He's guilty he got called out on being a penny pincher about what kids deserve. Not that he actually did it to them. He's upset that he's facing consequences for his behavior, not that he is ashamed he did it. Not the jerk. He needed to hear it. If he brings it up again, tell him he's welcome to use all the money he saved, excluding you and your brother from the family, on his daughter's house. He's an entitled jerk, and honestly, your mom is a jerk too for allowing her own kids to be subjected to that unfairness. For what it's worth, my dad remarried when I was 11, and my stepsister is a year older. My dad and stepmom, even though my dad made much more money, ensured that the two of us girls got everything the other did, almost to the point of comedy. If my stepsister wanted a shirt, my stepmom would grab one for me in a different color to make sure things were fair. That was probably over the top, but I admire them for making our home feel like we both belong there equally. When companies start tracking your productivity, beat the system. My company decided to implement third-party software to track employee productivity, and they started this BS way before lockdown and remote work. All technology teams were being monitored, and I worked on a product team under technology. The main metric they used was how much new code was being written, which is silly because even programmers don't write new code very often. Updated code didn't count, and those were most of the tickets I managed, and meanwhile, I was always fixing other people's code, and I was the go-to person for any escalations and releases. When this first started, I saw a dozen emails about writing more code, and I thought it was a joke until I got an unscheduled meeting with the department head. He scolded me for having written zero code that month, and despite pushing that my role doesn't exactly require me to write new code, he said, "Sorry, this is the new world." Exact words. Fine. I found some old code libraries that no one used anymore but were still active. Every month, I would copy the libraries, delete them, and then replace them. I tested it out, and that counted as new code. Before all this, I was a top performer up for promotion, but my reviews from before didn't count anymore, and all that mattered were these metrics. I tried to keep my shenanigans under the radar, but one month, I did the delete and replace move twice because I forgot if I did my monthly coding quota, and did it again just in case. Well, that quarter I won an award for Most Prolific Engineer, and it came with $2,000. That got the attention of my manager, who was luckily a cool guy and openly complained about how stupid the productivity tracking software was. He knew I wasn't writing code, and neither was he, so I finally told him my secret. He actually thought it was hilarious, and he himself had been just deleting and replacing lines of code to bypass the quota, but he didn't think about doing entire libraries. I knew I wouldn't get in trouble with him, and he even nominated me for a recognition award, which came with another $1,000 in gift cards. I did eventually get promoted, over 6 months later than initially discussed, but things got even worse with the company monitoring productivity during the lockdown. It was so bad to the point where they were logging how many times you were away from your computer for more than 5 minutes. People actually got fired for taking too many breaks between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Let's just say I was taking my laptop everywhere out of paranoia. It didn't increase productivity, but it for sure hurt my morale. Thankfully, I got the heck out of there. The rest of my team was not so lucky, but I still get texts from my old manager and team about how they're using my shenanigans. Ultimately, I got a nice $3,000 in awards, $15,000 from the promotion, and a lifetime of drinks from my team for beating the system. Am I the jerk for letting my father go hungry for more than a day? Growing up, I was forced to do all the chores while my two brothers weren't. I didn't come to no contact with my parents because it's necessary not to cut contact with them. I'm the only one who lives in the same city. The others live too far away. On Saturday, last week, my parents called me saying that there was a problem with the electrical part in their house, and they begged me to let them stay at my house for 4 days, as they would be spending a lot of money to fix it and they couldn't afford to stay at the hotel. I agreed, but said that I had my routine and would not be helping my father. They agreed. On the first day, it was pretty okay, and my mom did everything for my dad. The next day, my mom had to make an emergency trip to her sister. Her sister paid for her to go, and she lives in another city, in the morning. I went to work and had lunch at the company. When I got home, my father said, "Wow, I thought you would never come home. Can you make something for me? I just ate what your mother made for lunch in the morning." Keep in mind that my fridge was full and my father knows how to cook, in addition to knowing how to use the cell phone and internet. He just didn't want to do it because my mother does everything. Me. "Look, Dad, I'm really tired. Besides, I'm leaving here in an hour." It was 6 p.m. He started to complain, saying that he would get hungry, that I should make him food for lunch and dinner, blah blah blah. I just replied, "You have hands, you have a telephone. There's a pizzeria contact on the fridge if you don't want to make food, but I won't make it." The night was good and I only returned at 1 a.m. My father was already sleeping and Mom didn't come back. I woke up late, so I just ran to work without even saying hello to him, so I didn't pay attention to anything. As the day before, I ate at work. When it was about 4 p.m., my mother called me screaming, saying that my father was dizzy with hunger because I refused to make him anything and I knew he doesn't do those things, so it wouldn't cost me anything to make him even a basic snack, but I preferred to let him starve. I pointed out what I said before they came, and she started saying that this was negligence with an elderly person who is capable of doing everything. They left before I got home and stayed at a random person's house. My brothers are complaining, accusing me of being petty and vindictive, just like my parents. I don't think I'm wrong, but I would like outside perspective. Am I the jerk? My father is 63 and my mother is 60. Not the jerk. Your father is a grown man. He could make something himself, but he chose to get into a power struggle with you in your own home while they're staying with you. Good for you for standing up for yourself. Yeah, and if your brothers won't back off, I would tell them they're either perfectly capable of moving back home, moving in with your parents, or moving your parents out to them to take care of them properly, or they're capable of shutting up and letting you deal with your dad's petty tantrums as you see it. I think your dad may be famous. I think I saw his picture under the definition of weaponized incompetence. Not the jerk. Sorry about your family dynamics. You were clear when they asked to stay with you. If they chose to ignore it, that's on them. Not the jerk. Starving with a fridge full of food? Really? Wow. You could have at least made him snacks? Are you kidding me? What is he, a 5-year-old? Sounds like your father is being a petulant child and trying to make some absolutely ridiculous point about superiority by refusing to help himself. Good for you for standing up to them and calling out their BS. Just wow. Am I the jerk for telling a social group member that the free social activities were not free for me? I'm the organizer of a social meetup group. We have lots of activities to do on a regular basis that we all enjoy. Usually it's going out to eat, but also fun things like movies, bowling, farmers market, potlucks at various members' houses if they're able to host, grilling at the park. I have one member who asked me if I could please schedule activities for the group that are free because she's poor and can't afford activities that cost money. Fine, we can come up with some free or at least very low-cost activities to do, but I also have to consider the rest of the group and what they want. I don't mind the first several times she reminded me to remember to schedule free activities for those of us on a budget, but then I started to get mad. Especially after I organized 3 activities that were free: the visit to the farmer's market, the visit to the nature center, and a bike ride around the college campus, specifically so that she could participate, and she didn't even show up. She said that the farmer's market was not free. It sure can be if you don't buy anything. I didn't buy anything. I walked around and looked at stuff. And the bike ride was because we also planned to go out for pizza afterwards. She could have come bike riding with us and then skipped out on the pizza if she didn't want to spend money. Nobody else would have shown up if we were just going to ride bikes and not going somewhere to refresh afterwards. Did she expect us to sit around in the heat and look at each other? She wanted me to schedule potlucks, which are fine if people are willing to host, but potlucks are not free. She was getting on my nerves with her constant reminders to remember to reschedule free things because she's poor and can't participate unless it's free. So one day, while she was telling me for the 50 millionth time, I told her that this activity we were doing cost me about $100. It was a picnic in the park we were having. I brought the ice chest and portable grill so we could have this fun activity, which was fun, but it was not free. So apparently her feelings were hurt because I told her what this activity cost me to set up, and I didn't mind buying the portable grill and ice chest. I chose to do that. She thought it was inappropriate for me to tell her what I spent for supplies so that she could enjoy her free, but not for me, activity. So, am I the jerk? First for scheduling activities that could have been free for her, but she didn't show up because it wasn't completely free, and for telling her what this so-called free activity had actually cost me to set up. Not the jerk. Make her an organizer and let her run the free activities, seeing as she doesn't seem to think yours are free enough for her. OP. I always reiterated that any member can set up and organize an event if they want to, like hiking for example. Some people wanted to go hiking, but I'm not a hiker, and I had no clue where the good hikes were. But people who are into hiking were free to suggest a place and then set up a day and time. No one ever did. If you want a hike organized, I'm not your person for that. I would just stick to that as your mantra from now on. We always like to have a variety of events. I'm happy that you want to set up some free ones. I can't wait to see what you plan. And be super friendly and cheerful about it. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. Let me translate her request for you. I want a handout, someone to pay for me to have an enjoyable outing. Just block her out of the group and move on. People like that are toxic. Everyone sucks here. She's wrong for not showing up for the things that are in her budget. You're wrong for reminding her that she's a charity case that others are sacrificing money for. Nobody who's poor wants it bitterly thrown in their face that people resent doing things decent for them. Also, the have-nots waving bye to the haves halfway through an outing when they depart for more costly pleasures is pretty awkward and depressing. I'd have probably skipped that bike ride too. You're the jerk. You didn't schedule a single thing that's free. You always had a caveat to buying something. She's not asking for charity, she's asking for actual free activities. All the not the jerks sound unempathetic. OP. Then feel free to start your own social group where you schedule nothing but absolutely free activities that cost no one anything. Which, like I keep saying, would amount to sitting in a public park with no food or drink except water and looking at each other. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the other group member? Please let us know.
Sometimes I think socializing is a lot more trouble than it's worth. Know what I mean, Reddit boy?
Why don't you ask someone who works here? The time I was a jerk. This is an old story from about 20 or so years ago. I stopped at Costco on the way home from work. I just came in looking for some electronics or whatnot, and so wasn't pushing a cart. And while in the electronics section, this older woman sees me looking over some item, and I can see she's interested in an item shelved near the one I'm looking at. I don't even remember what the items were. Anyway, she turns and asks me some very specific questions about the item she's looking at. I looked up at her and simply answered, "Sorry, I have no idea." A few minutes later, at the other end of the same aisle, this same lady comes up to me with some other item in her hands and asks me, "Do you know blah 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 about this?" Again, it was an item that I had no idea about. And at this point, I'm mildly annoyed and just answered, "Nope," and turned to go browse the next aisle over. It's worthwhile, I think, at this point in the story to explain that I was working in northern New Jersey, basically a suburb of New York City, in a fairly stressful job, and one of the reasons I had even stopped at Costco was that my 12-mile ride home was mired in terrible traffic. Rather than spend the next 30 minutes trying to go the last 6 miles home, I pulled into the Costco I was about to crawl past, figuring I'd do a little shopping and let some of the traffic clear out while I did so. So I started this whole experience wound a little tightly. On top of that, this was when I was in my early 30s or late 20s. I was a pretty big jerk back then. I have mellowed since, and partly due to this experience. Anyway, moving on. 5 minutes later, I'm nerding out over whatever thing I was looking at in the next aisle, and the woman comes around the corner from the other aisle where I'd left her, specifically walking past other customers to come to ask me a third question about something that I had no idea about. By now, I'm pretty annoyed. It's clear to me that she's not flirting with me or anything like that, and I cannot understand why she keeps coming to bug me about these things when all I want to do is just waste a few minutes out of traffic. In all honesty, if I'd had any answers for her, I would likely have given them to her, but I didn't have those answers. In reply to her question, I gave her a crappy look, and in a very condescending voice I said, "I have no idea, but maybe you ought to ask someone who works here," and made an overly dramatic gesture with my hands pointing towards one of the employees rounding the corner at the edge of the electronics section about 20 feet away. The woman looked at me, somewhat offended, and didn't say another word. I didn't give a darn. Why couldn't this lady leave me to my nerding out? I left the electronics section and wandered off, and after another 20 or so minutes of walking around and just avoiding traffic, picked up some grocery item or other and walked to the cashier line to pay for it. As my turn came up to pay, I pulled out my wallet looking for my membership card and could not find it. I knew I had to show it to get into the store and quickly checked all my pant pockets. No card. The cashier smiles at me and points to my chest. I looked where she was pointing, and in a split second I realized, maybe not for the first time ever, that I was a giant jerk. So my employer had access control on all buildings, and you scanned your employee ID at the door of any of these buildings to enter. Employees were also obliged to display their IDs at all times while on work property. Many people wore the badge attached to one of those retractable cards that you clip to your belt. Some wore their badge on a loop of ribbon around their neck, and others, like myself, wore their badge in a transparent pouch that was designed to clip onto a shirt or jacket pocket. My employer also required business attire, so on my way home from work, I was dressed in leather-soled shoes, pleated dress pants, a white button-down shirt, and a tie. Left the jacket in the car for the trip to Costco. Apparently, I also left my work ID badge holder still clipped to my shirt pocket. At that point in time, it would not have been unusual for me to go in and out of buildings at work a dozen or more times on any given day. After a year or so, it had become a well-practiced and unthinking motion for me to grab my work ID from the badge holder that held it on my shirt pocket, flash it to the door sensor, and just slip it back into the pocket on the holder as I entered a building. Apparently, when I pulled my Costco ID out of my wallet to get into the store, I unthinkingly placed it in the badge holder, since I'd forgotten to take that off and leave it in my car with my jacket instead of back into my wallet. I had been walking around the store looking like a manager, with a badge displaying the Costco logo prominently in bright red letters right on my chest. As all of this realization came to me in the second or two after the cashier pointed out my Costco ID card I was wearing, my face went a little pale and she asked me if I was okay. I mumbled something about feeling dumb and this being a habit from work as I paid for my stuff. I hurried out of the store, hoping I didn't see the woman who had been asking me questions. It began to dawn on me that if I weren't such a jerk coward, I'd go and find that woman, explain to her what happened, and apologize for being so rude. Instead, I just left the store in shame, feeling about 2 inches tall. My Karen stepdaughter demands I pay for a useless college degree that won't even get her a job in the field that she wants to work in. My wife and I have been married for a decade. She's a stay-at-home wife and we have no kids of our own. She has a daughter from a previous relationship, Sarah, and we've gotten along for the most part. Sarah is a junior in college and pursuing a biology degree with additional courses required by medical schools. She's had dreams of being a doctor and helping people since her mom and I met. The problem is, she's not a very good student. She's failed her Biology 1 class and had to retake it to get a B. She really struggled in her next level biology class and finished with a C. She also got a C in her chemistry class. She got a B in Calculus 1 and 2. She's making A's in her non-science and non-math classes, so they're padding her GPA, which is at a 3.2. This semester, I just learned that she will make B's and C's in her science and math classes. I'm not a doctor and I don't know any doctors, but I did online research. I found out that medical schools require many things, but at the top of the list, they require a high GPA and top grades in science and math classes. With Sarah's grades, she's not getting into any medical school. I even looked into nursing school to see if I can talk her into maybe going that route, and all the ones I looked at require higher grades than what she currently has. I talked with my wife about it, and she said medical school looks at other things besides grades, and that's where Sarah excels. She has a solid volunteer resume, and she cares about people. I argued none of that matters if her grades are not good enough. She argues that Sarah will do great in interviews. Like I said, I have no experience with medical school, so I can't argue with her logic. Instead, I talked with Sarah when she came home for Thanksgiving, and I told her to look into another major because she might not be cut out to be a doctor. She ran to her mom, and we all got into a huge argument. I admit I lost my temper, and I yelled that I'm not wasting any more money on something she'll fail at. I told them both I'm not paying for next semester's classes until she changes her major to something more realistic. I feel bad, I really do, but I'm not rich, and I don't have money to waste if she doesn't have a chance to get into a medical school. Am I the jerk? Additional info. The reason why I want her to switch majors is that having a biology degree without any advanced degree is useless from my research. While I don't know any doctors, I have friends who have biology degrees without other advanced degrees, and they couldn't do anything with it. One had to go back to school for another degree, one works as an assistant manager at Lowe's, another has been a receptionist for 20 years. They all advised against getting just a biology degree. While these are all noble jobs, they didn't need to pay for a biology degree just to get these jobs. I'm still willing to pay for her degree if she switches to something that will allow her to get a good job. You're the jerk. You can pay for her undergrad even if you think she can't get into med school. The biology degree will still help her to get a job, whether it's as a doctor or not. I'd pay the 4 years if that's what you originally agreed to. I've heard stories of non-traditional routes to becoming a doctor. If she really wants to, she can make it happen. I had a friend go to community college, then finish her 4-year degree at a state school, go get a master's in medical science, and then still couldn't get into US med schools. So she did the Caribbean medical school route. It's a harder path, but at the end of it, she's still going to be a doctor when she passes the boards and completes her residency. She can also do grad school in a different area or move into lab work in the area of biology. It would be a jerk move to cut her off suddenly. You're the jerk. Let her graduate in biology. If her MCAT scores suck, she won't get into med school and she can do graduate work in another area, like public health. That's still medicine adjacent. She can also get a master's in education and teach high school biology. She can also work in a medical lab running samples. It sounds like with her grades, she won't get into med school, but she should still finish her undergraduate degree. Well, what would you do? Would you still pay for your stepdaughter's degree or not? Please let us know. Husband is trying to do our Thanksgiving meal himself this year and refuses my help. I cook Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners every year for my husband, his family, and our kid, and have for 16 years. I put a lot of love, planning, and effort into making it a really special day. This year, however, between work, parenting, and everything else, I'm tired and I don't want to cook Thanksgiving. I went to him and asked if we could just go to a nice restaurant instead. To my surprise, he said he'd handle it. However, even cooking a simple Thanksgiving meal requires forethought, like getting the frozen turkey in the fridge to defrost multiple days in advance. Now is the time to pick up some items. I don't know if he knows what he signed up for. I started asking when he was planning on doing his grocery run and what dishes he was planning to serve. He just dodged the question and said he'd handle it. He has a habit of underestimating tasks and rushing last minute. I finally was like, look, why don't we work together and start planning? He admitted he was only going to cook a simple meal of turkey breast, mashed potatoes, and broccoli. That's it. Basically, I said that's not actually a special holiday dinner, and I wouldn't have agreed to that had I known what he meant. I said I'd be happy to work together and balance simple things like he wants to, and special like I want. I suggested turkey, potatoes, packet gravy, box stuffing, pre-made mac and cheese, canned cranberry sauce, broccoli, rolls, and a store-made pie. He got really defensive and made it about him versus me, very black and white. Your way or my way. His offer isn't good enough to me. I'm just trying to get my way. When I explained no, that's not what I meant, he insisted that I did. I can't imagine family showing up and being served a very simple meal like that. It's just bad holiday hosting. Maybe coordinating a potluck would be okay, but he wasn't doing that. We already committed to hosting them. Am I the jerk? Oh no, OP, his family is definitely expecting more and will also probably blame you when they have to adjust their expectations so drastically without warning. Not the jerk. Let him fail. Tell everyone the minute they arrive that hubby did everything. You're not even sure what's on the menu, but you're sure it will be fabulous, and all credit should go to him. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. You didn't want to do it because it's so much work, because it's a special day with special food. You suggested visiting a nice restaurant instead because it's a special day, etc. It's nice that he offered to handle it this year, but he is not really handling it. I cost Bank of America $8,000 legally. A bit of context. I've been in the mortgage and related businesses for over 30 years. I know it very well. I've never liked Bank of America, especially their servicing division. This story happened a few years ago. Just found out about this group. I refinanced my mortgage through a mortgage broker, and, to my aggravation, they sold the servicing rights to Bank of America. The entity that owns your loan is usually different than the one that you pay to service the loan. I was upset. I estimated that Bank of America paid about $5,000 to service my loan, as most folks at the time expect loans to stay on the books for at least 3 years. About 2 months after the servicing switched, Bank of America announced they'd be charging a $5 fee for the convenience to pay the mortgage online. Truly an unwarranted money grab. I'm blessed that I can put a little extra towards my mortgage payment every month. So the following month, I took out my mortgage payment plus $400 in quarters from my local bank. I then went to my local Bank of America branch and handed them my mortgage payment in quarters and repayment stub. I asked for a receipt of payment. I overpaid my mortgage to reduce the current balance and thereby reducing Bank of America's fees. The nice branch manager said, "You can write a check, you don't have to pay in coins." I said I could, but I would charge a $9.50 convenient fee for the stamp, my check, and the ink used. The branch manager actually laughed and said okay. They counted the money and I got my receipt. Next month, the charge was still there, so I went to another local Bank of America branch, which had gotten bad reviews on Yelp due to the hostile bank manager. I did the same thing. The branch manager said, "Write a check. We don't accept quarters." I said, "Shall I call the local state's banking commissioner, the Consumer Financial Protection Board, and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, U.S. top bank regulator, and say you won't accept legal tender?" I asked to talk to the district manager. I was making a stink. About 20 minutes later, he begrudgingly had the staff count the quarters and I got a receipt. I told the manager that I would be bringing dimes next time. The next month, I brought dimes. He accepted them, but glared at me the whole time. After that payment, Bank of America rescinded their convenience fee. The month after that, I refinanced my mortgage at a lower rate. Bank of America only got roughly 6 months of fees for servicing and they expect it to last 3 years at minimum, 5 years to be profitable. One of my proudest malicious compliance moments. They must be my leaves on my curb? As you wish. The leaf collection company from my neighborhood has absurdly strict rules about where leaves must be for pickup. I live at the end of a cul-de-sac, so my curb is curved and pretty short, about 30 feet, 9 meters long. My property is wedge-shaped, so my backyard is quite long, 200 feet, 60 meters, and has 40 to 50 oak trees. I also have 2 sugar maples in my front yard. So leaves, lots of leaves. Pickup rules state leaves must be within 5 feet of the curb, but not on the road. They must also be at least 15 feet from a mailbox. Because subscriptions for leaf pickup are by individual homeowner, neighbors are not allowed to combine leaves and cannot buy a group subscription. Subscribers must only put their leaves from the current year out for pickup. Pickup trucks use GPS to identify homes who have signed up and ignore leaves in front of homes that did not sign up. Because I have so many leaves and so little curb, only 15 feet of available curb due to the required distance from a mailbox, I called the leaf collection company and asked to put the leaves along a longer curb I share with my neighbor. No problem, they said. Great. The truck came through and picked up a fraction of the pile and left the rest of the pile the driver decided was in front of my neighbor's property. I called the company back and a different person said those are the rules. I'll just have to figure it out. Fine. Now it's on. I have 15 feet of width and 5 feet of depth. There is, however, no limit on height. I moved the remaining leaves to my available curb space. I collected the rest of my leaves and added them to the pile. I spoke with my neighbors and acquired the rights to their leaves by paying them $1 each. Now they are all my leaves. I shoveled and swept the leaves off the streets. They went on the pile. I collected the repurchased leaves from the neighbors. They went on the pile. Leaves continued to fall, so I kept adding them. It was a lot of work, but the pile was over 12 feet tall. I spent a ton of time using a snow shovel to fling the leaves to the top of the pile that was more than 5 feet above my head. Neighborhood residents stopped to gape at the epic leaf mound. I'm happy to battle willful ignorance with malicious compliance. I reminded myself of this every time I spent another hour tending to the obscenity at my curb. The truck came today. The pile dwarfed the truck. They had to drive away and dump leaves, then come back and reload twice. Angry director gets her comeuppance in 4 gradual actions. Several years ago, I used to work at an agency that hired us out as short-term temporary workers or contractors. These jobs pretty much consisted of stuff that company employees couldn't be bothered to do, and so got someone in to sort it out. It wasn't great, but I had to make ends meet. Anyway, one of these jobs was for 150 hours at 5 weeks of office administration. There wasn't much more information to go on, but a job is a job. The office turned out to be a quite small, stuffy little building at the back of an industrial estate. I was told to report to Beryl. When I turned up, I was met by a rather grumpy-looking old lady having a cigarette by the front door. This was Beryl. Beryl didn't even say hello to me or even ask my name, but showed me in, pointed at an enormous pile of boxes full of paperwork, saying,
This all needs to be scanned in. There are 2 scanners connected to a computer there. Off you go. Let someone know if you need help.
So off I went. That pile of boxes was to be my job for the next month and a bit. Joy. The office was predominantly young men, with Beryl being the only other woman. She was in her 50s and spent more time smoking than working, and without being rude, clearly didn't look after herself. It was quite flattering to have a bunch of these guys pop by my workstation for a chat occasionally. After a few days of scanning, Beryl visited my cubicle. She wasn't happy that I spent too much time talking and not enough time working. I was confused. While I didn't have any metrics or targets, I was pretty consistently working through this mountain of paperwork. I got the impression that Beryl didn't like the attention I was getting. I pointed out to her that I haven't left my desk apart from to go to the bathroom. If someone's over here to talk to me, then that's fine, as I can talk and scan at the same time, like I'm doing right now. She wasn't happy and turned away, calling out,
Just do your job,
as she left. Some of the other guys had heard this, and they popped by my desk later and said not to worry. They'd had agency staff before, and Beryl always hated if a young woman arrived because she was grumpy and jealous. Not my words. In fact, a few years ago, one young woman had left the office in tears because Beryl had torn her a new one for going off to lunch with some of the other guys. Naturally, this annoyed me, particularly because Beryl thought she could bully and disrespect agency staff, and I certainly wasn't going to leave the job because of an angry jerk. Malicious compliance number 1. For the rest of my time there, I made sure to get dressed up. Makeup, curls, a mini office dress, stiletto heels. When Beryl saw me clicking my way down the office the next day, fully dressed up just to scan some paperwork, she scowled at me but didn't say anything. The next week, Beryl took some time out of her busy smoking schedule to visit me in my cubicle. The second time she had done so since I'd started. Some of the paperwork I was scanning had been stapled together, so I'd asked someone in the office for a staple remover and a stapler. I used to pull out the staple, scan the document, rename it on the computer, then restaple it and put it back in the box. I was just pulling a staple out when Beryl walked by. Beryl's first words to me were,
What are you doing?
I replied that this document was stapled, and if I put it in the machine, it would jam. She raised her voice slightly and said,
Nobody told you to do that. Just scan each page separately. Leave the papers alone.
I could almost hear her eye roll as she walked away. Malicious compliance number 2. So I did. I scanned everything with staples just folded over, and then created folders called Document 123, and each scan went in as 123 page 1.pdf, 123 page 2.pdf. You get the idea. This slowed me down a lot, but hey, it's what I was asked to do. At some point, Beryl walked by and saw me flipping pages like that. I'd put my hair in a bun and taken my heels off, and she smirked. She thought she had flustered me and that I didn't see her reaction. Don't worry, Beryl, you didn't, and I did. The paperwork I was scanning in was boxed up as the newest first, so as I got to some of the older papers, these had been moved around a couple of times and were slightly scruffed up or folded or similar. A jammed scanner wasn't an issue. It had happened a couple of times, but as I got to the older papers, the jams became more frequent. It was easy to sort through. Just open the back door of the scanner, roll the paper out, cancel the job, and redo it. At this point, I'd gone back to unstapling and restapling because Beryl had given me some space, thinking she had broken me, and I just wanted to get the job done so I could leave. Beryl walked in one day. This would have been my 4th week there. She saw me unjamming the scanner and flipped her top. She yelled,
What are you doing?
At this point, all heads in the office turned to where we were. I calmly told her, the scanner has jammed. I'm just pulling the paper out so I can rescan it. Shouldn't take more than a few minutes. She continued yelling.
At no point were you instructed to perform the repairs. We have someone for that. Stop what you are doing and get someone to help you. I asked you this when you started. Why can't you follow simple instructions?
It took a lot of patience not to argue back with her, which I thought was what she wanted, but I said, okay, fine. Can I speak to the IT guy to sort this out? I couldn't have choreographed her response better. I then knew that she did want me to argue so that she could kick me out because she hesitated and said,
Well, the IT guy is off for the rest of the week.
This was a Thursday.
Ahem. Use the other scanner. If you jam it, let me know.
And stormed off. Malicious compliance number 3. I knew her diary and she was off the next day, Friday. I carried on with one scanner, making sure it didn't jam that day, and waited until the next morning. Coincidentally, the scanner jammed on the first piece of paper I fed into it. Who'd have thought? Obviously, I rang Beryl. She didn't answer her phone, and she wasn't in the office. I spent the day sitting around without much to do. Whilst talking to the guys in the office, I learned that the company had been bought by a much larger IT firm, and they just wanted the rights to the proprietary software that they had developed. It also turned out that the CEO of the small company basically paid himself into retirement and appointed Beryl as the director. Beryl knew that her days were numbered, so she was even more bitter to the staff. The guys working there had been committed various levels of careers within the new IT firm, which they were happy with. As I was told, 120,000 employees, 30 dev roles are easy to find. One director role is not. Anyway, when we returned on Monday, you could almost see the vein in her neck throbbing. She'd wasted an entire day of whatever her company paid my agency because little old me wasn't trusted to fix a paper jam. I used to get in a little later than the rest of the staff, agency perks. But when I got in, she'd had the IT champion perform the skilled job of opening a scanner and pulling a piece of paper out. She didn't even look at me when she said,
Scanners are fixed. Get on with your job and don't mess around.
At this point, you might be thinking, this is a lot of text for some pretty trivial malicious compliance. Well, you'll like the final part. My last week there coincided with a new contract that the company had been given by their new owners. I assume it was some sort of litmus test. Whilst I don't pretend to understand what it was, The job involved a lot of scanning documents that had been handwritten. Hooray, more boxes. At the same time, a few of the guys who worked in there were going on a visit to the new parent company, which were based in the USA. I live in the UK. The IT champion was one of these guys who went. When the boxes were delivered to my cubicle, Beryl popped by and said,
"These take priority. All of what I said to you is more important than ever. Do not mess around, otherwise you're out of the door. Am I clear?"
"Yes, ma'am." The paperwork delivered was from the USA. Our paper sizes are different. The first piece of paper I fed into the scanner jammed it, a safety lock, because it expected A4 and got US letter instead. I jammed both scanners. Beryl, not being one to turn down a free trip to America, had gone with them. I rang her at 11 a.m. UK time, which was 5 a.m. their time. She picked up and was not impressed. I felt sorry for the folks adjacent to her hotel room when she screamed down the phone,
"You've done what? How? Why?"
I tell her about the USA paperwork.
"Can you not fix it?"
Final malicious compliance. "No, you've told me many times that I can't fix these machines. What's the business continuity plan?" Side note, my brother told me that phrase and he still doesn't understand why I turned up to his house a bit later with a few pizzas and a box of beer. Beryl had no idea what to do. She was clearly flustered.
"Can you just do what you can? We need this done."
"What would you want me to do?"
"Can you fix the scanners? Because this is really important."
"I'm sorry, you told me I can't do that. I need simple instructions to work with."
"Just fix it."
"I'd be happy to show an IT specialist where the scanners are, if you can get them here to hang up tone." Well, that's that then. I spent the rest of the week chatting with my colleagues, updating my CV, and applying for jobs. Nobody turned up to fix the scanners. When my final week finished, I said bye to the guys I'd worked with, wished them luck, and left with none of the critical paperwork scanned in. When Beryl got back from her business trip, I learned that she had spent one day at the parent company and left it to the other guys. When crap hit the fan because nothing was being delivered, they wondered where she was. This was day 2 into the 5-day business trip. She was at a spa, phone switched off. She flew out early on day 5 without seeing any of her colleagues of the parent company. I kept in touch with a few of the guys afterwards. After this, the dev guys were transferred contracts to the larger IT firm. They all got a very small salary increase, but they were able to work from home. This was before lockdown, so it was a bit of a rarity back then. Beryl, meanwhile, didn't fare so well. She was initially offered redundancy, paid, including pension deals, but when someone complained that she had not been present for the meetings, which I think was their IT champion, they found out she had been sightseeing, shopping, tanning, and getting her hair done on company time. She ended up being fired. No bonus, no pension, nothing. I quit the agency not long after, and after 1 or 2 moves, ended up in a job I'm very happy with. The agency were none of the wiser about any of this. They just wanted their money, and aside from one initial checkup call, left me to it. Am I the jerk for eating alone in a different room at my boyfriend's parents' house? For many years, my boyfriend's parents have had us over for brunch, lunch, or dinner. They have a nice deck with an outdoor table and chairs and use it to eat or hang out. Thing is, it has to be freezing temperatures before they'll concede and eat in the dining room. I've had to sit on that deck many times trying to eat my food while I'm shivering, even though I'm wearing layers. Last week, we were over there for brunch mid-morning. The outdoor table was set with plates, etc. I had my layers on again, but I was cold. When we were outside, I noticed the thermometer read about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. The food got cold quickly, and I decided I'd had enough. I told them as nicely as I could that I was too cold. The mom turned to the dad and asked, "Well, should we pack it in?" The dad, scooping food into his mouth, said, "No, it's not too bad out here," and kept on eating. Nothing more was said, not even from my boyfriend. Everyone just kept eating. So I apologized sincerely that I needed to eat inside, gathered my plate, napkin, silverware, and glass, and went into the dining room. I finished eating before they were done, and since I was warmed up, I went back to the deck while they finished up. I could feel tension and no one even talked to me. After we left, my boyfriend went off on me in the car for being rude. I agree it's not the best thing to do, but I had put up with this for a long time out of politeness, and I think their behavior is nutty. Sure, after years of this, I should know better than to go over there with my boyfriend if it's a cold day. I do it to be a good girlfriend and a good daughter-in-law. Not the jerk. They were rude. You're a guest. They should have went inside. What's wrong with them? 45 degrees Fahrenheit is cold. Maybe they should invest in a patio heater. OP. Great idea. Christmas gift from Junior and me. You do realize that getting them that heater would only be an excuse for them to stay out in the cold weather even longer, right? OP. Good point. But if it works well enough to keep me warm, we can all be happy. Might need to get two. Oh, but it's not cold enough to start it. Only 45 degrees. That thing costs money to run, you know. I would simply just not go to their house when it's too cold to sit outside. 45 degrees Fahrenheit is 7 degrees Celsius. No, just no. OP. That reminds me, the dad keeps the hot water heater off and turns it on when he wants to take a shower. He thinks having hot water sitting around will result in wasted energy lost when it's not used. I mean, yeah, there is some loss, but not much. Even my boyfriend thinks that's extreme. The mom hates this. Husband expects me to handle our Christmas this year with just $100. So I'm a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids. My husband works full-time and he gets an okay salary, but he's tightened the grip on spending for the past 4 months to be able to save up to go watch the football event overseas. He's literally obsessed with anything to do with football. He said he rarely ever gets to do what he wants to, and so I didn't want to judge him since it's his money eventually. We discussed plans for Christmas, and he told me to handle everything since he won't be back until December 20th. He told me he had put aside money for Christmas decorations, food, gifts, kids' needs, etc. The money in total was $100. I was completely shocked, and I told him $100 for an entire family's Christmas celebration was ridiculously not enough. He shrugged, saying it's all he's got, but I pointed out how he's paying for his friends' and his girlfriend's travel expenses. He told me to just take it, but I said that if he decides to leave me with just $100, then I won't be doing anything for Christmas. We had lots of arguments and couldn't get this resolved. He's in Qatar now. He left days ago. Yesterday, while I was cleaning, I found an envelope with the same $100 and a note from him telling me to make it work. I sent him a message that I've decided I won't be doing anything for Christmas with this little money, period. He was livid. He just kept sending an angry message after another, calling me spoiled and telling me to stop expecting to live like I was still living in my parents' house and to stop trying to rob the kids of enjoying the holidays like the other kids. I haven't replied, but he's livid, saying I'm punishing him for going and trying to guilt him using his own money. Not the jerk. Why is it his money when you're in charge of the household admin and childcare while he waltzes off with his friends to pay thousands to watch a bunch of overpaid guys kick a ball around a stadium built on eco-destruction and human rights violations? No sane person from this century could pull off Christmas with $100 unless they go in for petty theft on a grand scale. Ultimatum time. He treats you as an equal financially, or you leave and get child support. Not just that. He would rather pay for his buddy and his girlfriend to travel than provide his kids with a decent holiday. OP, you're not the jerk, and if you have any other family to spend the holidays with, please do that instead. So he has 1. Tightened the family budget for an event that only benefits him. 2. Paid for his friend and his friend's girlfriend even though point 1 exists. 3. Expects you to plan, cater, and buy Christmas decorations, etc. with $100 and just deal with it. 4. Is gaslighting you and blaming you for his selfish actions and choices. 5. It's not his money, it's his family's money. I'm sure if you worked and pulled a stunt like this, he would be more than upset. 6. Use the $100 to get a locksmith. He doesn't value you and your contributions to the family, nor your 3 kids. The World Cup isn't any more important than your family. It's literally televised. There's no real reason to go. Not the jerk. To be honest, if someone showed me and our kids this much disrespect, the only thing they'd be getting is separation and divorce papers. Am I the jerk for walking out of a restaurant twice after my wife made me the third wheel again? I, 30 male, my wife, 29 female, planned a date night tonight as our kids were at my in-laws. We hadn't decided where to go, and while driving, my wife asked me where to go. I told her that I don't care, as long as it's somewhere that her coworkers don't work, because my wife works in the restaurant industry and knows a lot of people that work at the places near us. This turns into the majority of our dates being her talking with them instead of me. So I tell my wife, as long as I'm not made into a third wheel again this time, I'll be happy. She picks a Tex-Mex place and says, I don't know anyone that works there. As soon as we walk into the restaurant, someone shouts my wife's name and a woman comes over to us and tells us she'll take us. Turns out this woman is an ex-coworker. We sit at our table, and my wife and her are already talking and gossiping about the things going on at their previous jobs. I wasn't mad at this point because I know that they want to catch up. After several minutes of this, she left to go get our drinks, and my wife apologizes and says that she had no idea that she worked there. A few minutes later, she comes back with our drinks and her boyfriend, who is also an ex-coworker of my wife's, and they proceed to talk and ignore me again. Then after taking our food orders, she stays at the table and they talk for another 5 to 7 minutes instead of putting our order in. I try to join in and I'm ignored again. When she goes to put the order in, I tell my wife, "I asked for you not to do this one thing tonight." She proceeds to tell me that she didn't want to be rude and it's just small talk. I tell her that I tried to join in and they ignored me. She tells me that they didn't ignore me, they just didn't hear me. I was speaking as loud as they were. She then asks me, "What do you want me to do? Tell her to buzz off?" I said, "No, politely tell her that you are on a date with your husband and we'd like to spend some time together." She tells me that this is rude and it's basically the same as telling her to buzz off. She tells me to stop being in a bad mood because we're alone now and that I'm the only one ruining the night. I said, "Fine then, I'll remove myself," and got up and walked out of the restaurant. I stood outside several minutes until she called and begged me to come inside. There were a few issues with my meal, which turned into another argument with her saying nothing can be right because I'm in a bad mood because she spoke to someone. I told her that I refuse to let her make me the jerk in this situation. She says that I'm being controlling and this is what normal people do and that I'm being psychotic. I ask her for the keys so I can go out to the car and cool off. She tells me no. So I tell her I'm going to walk home and get up to leave. She calls me 20 minutes later, asks where I am, and comes to pick me up. This turned into another giant fight and her saying she's going to stay the night at her parents and that this is why her friends think I'm the jerk. So, am I the jerk? Edit. I forgot to mention that our server's boyfriend that also works at the restaurant and knows my wife also approached the table and spoke to my wife. However, that was a 2-minute conversation. Then he left and didn't bother us again. Not the jerk. You made it clear that this was a sore spot and your wife chose to be rude to you rather than risk coming across as rude to her friends. She easily could have said, "It's so great to see you guys, but this is a rare night without the kids for us, so let's catch up later." That would have been considerate of everyone. She prioritized her friends over you. You're the jerk. You got so upset that your wife was chatting to a friend that you stormed outside to pout like a child. After you went back in, you had problems with your food and then got so upset you wanted to leave and walk home? This is pretty childish behavior. It seems your wife legitimately didn't know that her former colleagues worked here and you never explained to the colleague that you were on a date night and would appreciate some privacy. And you needed to be the one to say that because it is your wife's industry. If your wife said it and it was taken rudely, it could affect her reputation. If you said it, worst case, they might think your wife is married to a jerk, but at least it wouldn't affect her. But in general, going outside to pout because your wife is talking to someone else and you feel ignored just seems like something a child would do, not a grown man. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know.
I would have been like, "Excuse me, we're on a date night. Can you, stop bothering us?"
Karen's server refuses to refund my tip. I went into a burrito bowl place to order takeout. They had this new tip option on the card reader that they've never had before. The card reader is not touchscreen, nor are there tabs on the side to select options. They're just numbers. Before I paid, the screen asked what amount I wanted to tip, 20%, 25, 30, or other. I tried to press the number 4 for other, but the button didn't work. I told the worker that number 4 did not work and asked the worker what to press for other, and she told me 3. After I selected 3, it added a 30% tip to my card. I told her I wanted to select other and not 30%. She told me she was not aware that I was not trying to tip and she thought she remembered the order number. I asked her to refund my tip and she said that's not possible since they can only refund actual orders if there's something wrong with the food. I told her the card reader buttons were not working properly and it doesn't have an easy or obvious option to select no, nor did the right option work. She refused to refund me, saying, "It wasn't that much money anyway." I asked to speak to the manager, telling the manager they need a more user-friendly option to select no on the card reader, and the manager told me all the card readers are like that, which it's not. Other places have a no option and are touchscreen. She told me my tip would be really appreciated and it would help her staff since the holidays are coming up, and this could be my way to make someone's day. I told her that because they are using a system like this, they don't care about their customers, let alone their coworkers, if they need to even rely on scamming people to get tips, and I want a refund. The manager asked me why I selected a 30% option if I wanted to select other, and I told her the number for other didn't work, and when I asked her worker about it, she told me the wrong answer. She told me I was gullible and blaming her worker for my own mistake, and out of good customer service, she will refund my tip, but told me this will not happen again. You're the jerk. See, this is why I have no problem messing with customers' food. My coworkers and I have to deal with people like you every day, and I can't tell you how infuriating it is. You couldn't just spare a few dollars as a simple thank you to the people who work their butts off making your food? I hope they ban you from their restaurant and that you learn to show a little compassion. Rich boy goes to Chipotle and accidentally leaves a tip, then goes full-on Karen when they aren't able to process a refund for the $2 tip you accidentally gave them. If I worked there, so help me God, you don't even want to know what I'd do to your food. I've been tested a few times like this before, and let's just say some of the entitled customers like yourself that rubbed me the wrong way got way more than they bargained for. I do chemistry in my spare time as a hobby, and I always have a full kit with me at work for the problematic customers. Heck, I even add some of my secret ingredients to random customers' food when I just don't like the way they look. Dang. Mess around and find out. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the employees? Please let us know.
I always tip servers well and I don't plan on stopping, but I am getting tired of these machines at the gas station that tell you to leave a tip when you're checking out for the chips that you bought.
Am I the jerk for being upset that my niece requested payment when I asked her to babysit for a couple of hours? My husband, who's in his 30s, male, and I, 30s, female, we have a 3-year-old son together, Max. Max is a sweet kid, but has a difficult time in unfamiliar situations, and he can get overstimulated easily. A little while ago, my husband was across the country on a work trip while I was home with Max. I got a call one morning from his manager informing me that my husband had been in a car accident and he was in the hospital. He couldn't tell me much, but said that although he was stable, it didn't look good and that I should come as soon as I can. I obviously freaked out. I booked a ticket just for myself because it would be almost impossible to travel with Max, and I could barely afford the last-minute ticket for myself. I called my mom, who lives a few hours away, and asked her to come watch Max while I'm away. At this point, I needed someone to watch Max for the time it would take for my mom to arrive so I could make the flight. Looking back, I probably could have handled the logistics better than this, but I was hysterical and was just doing things as I thought of them. I called 3 friends. 1 didn't answer and 2 were unable to help. Luckily, we live close to my brother and sister-in-law who have a daughter who's 17, Sarah. We're very close with them. Sarah answered the door and said her parents were out. I explained the situation and asked if she had watched Max for a couple of hours until my mom came. I should note that Sarah babysits for a few local families and obviously charges them for her services. We have never asked Sarah to babysit before. She showed some concern for my husband, and when I asked her again, she said something along the lines of, "Well, you'll pay me, right? I usually charge this much." I stared at her for a moment, not really expecting that response, and then my friend who didn't answer called me back and said of course she had watched Max. So I took Max and left without saying anything to my niece. I coordinated with my friend and my mom, then flew to see my husband. He ended up needing surgery, but is making a full recovery. A few days after he was able to fly home, we had dinner with my brother and sister-in-law. We were talking about the accident, and I mentioned that I had asked Sarah to watch Max. I also noted that I was a little upset that she brought up payment in that moment. My brother was surprised and said he would talk to her as that's not an appropriate reaction. My sister-in-law interjected and said she was proud of Sarah for advocating for herself. She and I argued, and she said that I was entitled for being surprised that Sarah asked for money. To be clear, if I asked Sarah to babysit under normal circumstances, I would absolutely expect to pay her. It was unsettling that Sarah would bring up payment while, for all I knew, my husband might not make it in a hospital on the other side of the country. I think it would have been more empathetic to bring up the topic of payment after I returned and confirm that my husband was okay. My sister-in-law is still being cold with me, and so is my niece. Am I the jerk for getting upset? Not the jerk. It was an emergency, a one-off thing, and the kid is family for goodness sake. Your niece is sadly lacking in empathy and decency, as is your sister-in-law. I'll bet had she agreed, you'd have done something nice for her upon your return. Glad your husband will be okay. In my opinion, you are not the jerk, because if you asked Sarah to babysit under normal circumstances, you would absolutely expect to pay her. I would normally be on her side. However, this was clearly a serious family emergency, and the right thing for her to do would be to help, or to ask you later on to compensate her in some more casual manner. Not the jerk. My aunt refused to babysit my brother and I when our dad almost didn't make it. This was 20 years ago. My mom's relationship with her never recovered. Niece needs to learn time and place to advocate for herself. Reddit likes to say we don't owe others anything, but you do. You owe them empathy if you expect to be part of a family unit. No jerks here. Sarah is a teenager, and really, all she did was ask for payment for babysitting. Socially flawless? No, but again, teenager. You were upset and worried and just didn't answer, then went about your business. It may have been awkward or something you didn't like, but in my opinion, there are no jerks here. It sounds to me that Sarah has had bad experiences with other people not paying her. I know hardworking teens who have gone unpaid because they didn't know how to negotiate or set boundaries and ended up feeling foolish afterwards, especially when it comes to helping relatives. I'm not saying that you wouldn't have paid her, but she had no way of knowing without asking you. She didn't have an empathetic response to your emergency. However, just as you expect empathy for your situation, as the adult, it would be gracious if you overlooked her mistake. What would have been a kind response is to say, of course you would pay, but to privately express to her later that in the emergency situation, you were a little hurt that she wasn't more concerned about your husband as her first reaction. By bringing it up to her parents, you are making it a more awkward situation. My kids are older teens, and they've benefited from relatives giving them the benefit of the doubt, but also pulling them aside and gently speaking to them. And I've done the same with my nieces and nephews. I try to come to them with the assumption that they have good intentions, but haven't learned proper etiquette yet. As a result, we have a good relationship. I don't think anyone is the jerk here, just a lot of high emotions and assumptions in a stressful situation. No jerks here, because you were understandably distraught, but gentle reminder, it is your responsibility to find childcare for your kid, even in an emergency, and that includes paying for it when needed. Also, she does this for work, so it makes sense she didn't want to give her services away for free. I know many family members that ask people to fix computers, for instance, that look at theirs for free. Would it have been nice if she did it for free, being that it's an emergency? Sure, but she's not obligated to. You're the jerk. I'm sorry you found yourself in such a terrible and stressful bind, but considering you would have had to pay an emergency sitter if all your contacts had fallen through, I don't think this is as unreasonable an ask as you're trying to argue it is. Although, honestly, this is the part that gets to me. You think it would have been more empathetic to bring up the topic of payment after you returned. You mean after she had already rendered services and couldn't do anything about it if you continued to insist you shouldn't be charged, let alone try to argue, as most people would, she should have said something in advance if that was the expectation. Yeah, no. You didn't want to pay her rates, and fortunately you didn't have to. Move on and drop the shame campaign. I understand that you feel that your niece's reaction was insensitive to your circumstances, but it's not unreasonable to be asked to be paid for labor. Whether you're in crisis or not, you're still asking her to work. In fact, you believing that your emergency entitles you to free labor seems problematic to me. Did you expect the doctors and nurses at your husband's hospital to patch him up for free also? Did you expect the pilot flying you to your husband's side to do so for free? No, you paid them for their services. Why is your niece exempt from that? Gentle, you're the jerk. I understand why you reacted that way in the heat of the moment, but to continue to bear a grudge for a 17-year-old negotiating the terms of a labor agreement is unreasonable. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her niece? Please let us know.
Don't you just love the way Reddit flip-flops their opinions?
Scam me on my overtime? Cue the long, expensive revenge. This happened in the early 2000s when I joined a startup. We agreed on a salary and no paid overtime and an evaluation in 3 months, and then annually. Standard stuff mostly. It was a very mediocre salary for the work, but I really liked the work itself, which was extremely interesting and challenging. For me, even if the finances were so-so, I felt I'd learn a lot of skills which would be useful in the future. After 3 years and having 10 decent clients and a bunch of clients trialing and money rolling in, the talk turned to back pay and paid overtime, plus compensating for the past overtime. At that point, around $50,000 in overtime had been accrued, which is a lot. Legally, it couldn't be back pay, so the talk was always of a discretionary bonus. Now at this point, everyone is okay with this, myself included, and this was discussed in writing, via company emails too, so I felt secure that no bad will was in play. I felt the company should be able to afford the payment. Equally, I'd happily settle for equity at a discount, which is legally possible there, if cash flow was an issue. The discussions about back pay, possible equity, had now started to drag on, and I was getting irked by this. In the end, I was made an offer of equity, which meant the company valuation was far beyond anything reasonable, in the hundreds of millions, and I'd get a minuscule stake, less than 0.01% of a company with 9 employees and a projected annual turnover of around 2 million. It was a forget you of sorts to do me out of the money, and I didn't just want to take that lying down. To say I was furious was an understatement. Anyway, the day he made that offer, I handed in my resignation. This sent the CTO into panic mode because the CEO had refused an updated contract and I was still on a 1-month notice period. Plus, I had a lot of untaken paid leave. Basically, it meant I was walking out right then and there. So, off I went that very same day, to the shock and surprise of everyone, I guess. The next day, I sent an official, registered letter requesting my overtime and back pay and received a negative response, which I followed up with another detailed demand. This was also rejected because the bonus was discretionary and there is no overtime. However, I'd been seeking legal advice, and I understood that they don't have a leg to stand on if I'm willing to pay for an attorney. As the liability in such matters is firmly and 100% on the employer, I was willing. You need to understand that going to a lawyer was very rare in these parts back then, so companies didn't generally expect this outcome. Things have changed since then. When going through the applicable laws with the attorney, I noticed there's a limitation of 7 years. So while my attorney was laying out what to do in order to get me my money in as little as a few weeks, I just asked him, what if we wait until it's 6 years and 11 months after the transgression and then file, demanding interest? I wanted this because the law stated that back pay is due at a 9% APR above the base rate, 3.25% at that time, accrued daily for every day past the due date. We're looking at about 12 to 12.5% compound daily APR. The risk is that the company folds in that time, but I decided to take that risk. I sent one final letter stating that I expect all the owed and accrued amounts to date to be paid immediately. Of course, nothing happened. For the next few years, life rolled on. The company did grow and become a known player in the area. When the time came, I found an attorney and started the case. We had copies of all of the communications, copies of the registered letters and responses. The back pay demanded now included interest, which was $112,000. What I didn't know was that, in addition to this, that there are fixed penalties for each instruction to perform uncompensated overtime. The total demand was something like $135,000. To say that the CEO, who is still CEO, lost his crap would be an understatement. I got a very nasty phone call, which I dutifully recorded as it wasn't completely unexpected, and was added to the filing. The CEO fought, or tried to, but when the judge heard the phone call, he took an immediate dim view. Reading through all of the communication just put more nails in the defense's coffin. The judge just ruled and instructed the company to pay immediately and without delay, and also ordered the company to pay all of my legal costs. They also got a full audit from the Department of Labor. The company paid up 1 week later. To add insult to injury, the evening of the court's decision, the CEO apparently got very drunk and crashed his car into another vehicle while drunk. He got a DUI conviction and lost his driver's license for half a year, and his insurance refused to pay out for the damages to his vehicle, brand new Mercedes S-Class, as he was drunk. All in all, a glorious day. Am I the jerk for pointing out that my brother lives a very privileged life? I'm 45, male. My older brother, who's 51, lives with me. He's never really been good at life. He's had a few jobs here and there, but mostly stuff like Walmart, McDonald's, and he delivered pizzas for about a month. He's never held down a job for more than 60 days. He dropped out of high school and never bothered to get a GED, let alone any college or trade school. He mostly just sits in his room drinking my booze, smoking, and eating my food while he plays whatever Japanese role-playing game he's currently obsessed with. I don't mind this, I truly don't. I did well in life, and my wife invested our money very well, so we're comfortable. I have more than enough resources to support him fully for the rest of our lives, and I intend to do so. He's not taking food out of my kids' mouths. He's not cutting into their college funds. It's literally extra money that I would just be squirreling away if I didn't spend it on him. Last night at dinner, my wife told me that her brother lost his job. He worked for a company that recently had massive layoffs, so it was due to no fault of his own, and asked me if we could float him some cash for bills and stuff while he finds a new job. I told her to have him send me an estimate of how much he needs to cover 6 months, and that was that. Or so I thought. My brother proceeded to head over to Facebook and post a rant about how people need to be more self-reliant and not ask for handouts they didn't earn. He didn't mention my brother-in-law by name, but it was pretty clear that was what had triggered his rant. I commented on his post, and I asked him how living off of me for the past 9 years was self-reliant. I told him that he's in an incredibly privileged position because not everyone has a millionaire brother to pay all their bills for them. I also asked how the allowance I give him every week is not a handout. Anyway, a bunch of his friends from his video game started clowning on him in the comments. Apparently, he tells people online that he's an investment banker. He deleted the post and has not come out of his room since. There is an en-suite bathroom, don't worry. My wife says that it was a messed up move for me to call him out publicly like that, and that I could have been more respectful about it. And my aunt is furious with me for airing the family laundry. So I kind of think I might be the jerk here. Not for what I said, but the fact that I had said it publicly. But at the same time, I don't feel like a jerk because his rant was public too. Not the jerk. A prime example of mess around and find out. I'd kick him out to prove a point, honestly. OP. No way I could do that over this. It'd be one thing if he was dangerous, like I'd toss him out in a heartbeat if I felt like we weren't safe with him here. But being a bit of a jerk isn't enough for me to make him go homeless, and that's what I'd essentially be condemning him to. There's nowhere else to go, and he has no skills that could make him enough money to survive. Not the jerk. He decided to do something unnecessary in public. Your aunt seems very fond of him. Will she be taking him in soon? OP. She literally can't. She's in publicly subsidized senior housing. They can't even have overnight guests, let alone move someone else in with them. They'd both end up on the street. Not the jerk, but he got what he deserved. He shouldn't run his mouth like that. The problem is that he doesn't view the wealth you've earned as yours. He views it as ours. You should sit him down and make sure he understands that you take care of him out of the goodness of your heart, and that he has no say at all about how you spend your money. You sound very generous with your family, and he can sit down and shut up or make arrangements to come pick him up to go live with her. He's not privileged, he's lucky. Lucky to have your help and support that wasn't earned. Not just lucky, but spoiled. Don't get me wrong, I have to hand it to you and your partner for doing very well for yourselves that you can house him with no issue. You are both extraordinarily generous to have done this. But this dude's past 50. He's seriously got to do something. He can't rely on you forever to give him a way to live like myself, who's still working on it in my 20s. Yeah, I know, the irony. Does he need some sort of medical help? Is it the way his mind operates that's causing this non-action problem? He may need some kind of cognitive therapy or medication so he can focus on whatever he should be doing, be it schooling or working. Anyway, you're not the jerk. He lied to his friends about what he does for some reason. Then he tried to rant because someone else reminds him of himself and you called him out, which isn't a bad thing. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his brother? Please let us know.
Sounds like Uncle messed around and found out.
If you don't want me to take advantage of your grading policy, then you shouldn't have had that policy to begin with. Taking a class. The class is graded on 7 different projects of increasing difficulty, then we have a final at the end, and your projects are worth 60% of your grade and the final is worth 40. The policy is they will drop the lowest project grade to calculate your grade. If the first 6 projects I got 5 perfect scores, 100 out of 100, and my lowest grade was 85 out of 100, this was the first project I had some mistakes, which I learned from. The last project seemed particularly long and annoying, and I'm quite busy with a lot of other things. I emailed the professor to clarify his grading policy, and he tells me I still need to submit something, otherwise the policy won't apply. So I submit my project, and my project is literally just the title of the project, my name, a summary of the project, and that's it. Took me about 5 minutes, if that. I submit. He tells me it's incomplete. I tell him that's the project I'm submitting. He tells me I'm going to get a really bad grade on this project. I say that's fine. I looked at the grading rubric. I should get 5 points. We get 5 points for the name and title. He tells me I'm taking advantage of his grading policy. I tell him it's his grading policy. He tells me he's not going to drop my lowest grade, and instead of having a 97.5 project grade, I'll have an 84.2 project grade. I go to his department chair. I CC him. I highlight the part in the syllabus where it clearly states lowest project grade will be dropped. I also attach the email of him confirming this policy and clearly stating something needs to be submitted to be graded for the policy to qualify. The chair responds and says that the policy outlined in the syllabus needs to be the policy that's followed, and therefore, when it comes time to calculating my final grade, he needs to drop my lowest project grade, which in this case would be a 5% grade. Oh, I already thought about the final and how that might impact his grading of my final, but his final is going to be multiple choice and auto-graded. The malicious part is, I obviously submitted subpar work, knowing that the work would get a bad grade, but it wouldn't matter because that grade would be dropped. Professor tried to back out, but department chair told him he needs to honor his grading policy. A few reasons why I did this. Had I done the final project, I would have probably spent 8 to 10 hours working on it. My project grade would have gone from 97.5 to 100, best case, assuming I got 100 on it, and I would have had less time to prepare for my final. If those 8 hours I spent preparing for my final nets me an extra 10% on my final, that's worth more than the max benefit of 2.5% I'd have gotten from doing my final project. Also, that's assuming I'd have gotten 100%. Obviously, anything better than 85 would have improved my grade, but the scale would still be somewhere from 0 to 2.5% improvement. You should have spent 3 hours on the project and assumed that the professor assigns these projects to teach you something, especially if he cares enough to actively go after little jerks trying to misuse his generous grading policy. I assume he's young. Anyone who's been teaching for a while, like the department head, has met 100 smug kids like you. Yeah, unfortunately, this just ruins that class for the rest of them. They'll probably take out their policy, and now every project counts, just because they wouldn't put in 1 hour. Yeah, this isn't malicious compliance. This is willful misuse of a goodwill policy. Congratulations on getting away with it, I guess, but it's not in the appropriate spirit of the sub. There was no antagonist until you decided to manifest one. Congratulations, that policy was there to help out students who made a mistake to be able to recover from it. Said policy will not exist in the future, but you really showed him. I usually support the malicious compliance, but this is wrong on so many levels. You took a policy meant to help struggling students and used it to be lazy, and I'm willing to bet you've ruined it for every future student. Stay in a receptionist place? Okay. Context. I worked front desk at an optical store for 2 years. I had no experience and knew nothing about eye health when I started there. Over time, I learned to do contact lens training, how to work the machine for glaucoma testing, visual field testing, how to adjust glasses, and a little bit about sales. There was a fire and we had to relocate, which brought on a lot of stress to boss lady. We'll call her ma'am. We ended up losing our tech who did the contact lens trainings and visual fields, and our lead optician. Being the type of person who doesn't like to see others struggle, I always offered to help whenever I could, especially if the patient was nice. When we reopened, ma'am's husband came to work at the office as a manager, which at the time I thought was nice because I'm sure she needed the extra support. We'll call him Sir. He knew nothing about optical, so he was also training while managing. The problem started on opening day with Sir and I. He wanted to play meditation music and forest sounds. Everyone else wanted general pop and regular music. Since I had access to the speaker, I would adjust it for them. He loved the new space. I missed the old space, but we never spoke bad about the new one. If the office was busy and a pair of glasses needed to be adjusted, I'd offer or be asked to help, and in front of the patient, he'd yell, "Do you know what you're doing?" One time I turned to him and said, "I've been doing it longer than you." I'm sure he didn't like that. We had a meeting where he had no bad comments about my work, but told me I make him want to leave. He would report every word and minor mistake I made to ma'am, and she would send me random texts about them outside of work hours. I never got in trouble for anything, but it was so annoying. Story. On one particular day, I was doing mostly contact lenses trainings, and a patient called about a contact lens being stuck in her eye. These were considered emergencies, so I told her to come in and see the doctor, ma'am. When the patient came in, she looked really uncomfortable and asked how long until she's seen. I offered to take a look until she could see the doctor. When I took her to the back, I tried taking out the lens and couldn't find anything. I told her this and she looked discouraged. I said to her, I don't see or feel anything, so you'd be better off waiting for the doctor, and that ain't me. She laughed it off. I told her I'd been doing trainings all day and was hoping to help her and apologized. She said it was okay and sat in the front. Apparently, she went into the room and ma'am told her there were no contacts in her eyes. The patient said that the nurse told her that there's a lens in her eye and she wanted ma'am to double check. Ma'am was really upset about this because she has to spend extra time explaining to the patient that I was nothing more than a receptionist. When she came out, she made sure to go off on me in front of the patient and my coworkers. I just nodded and apologized. Even after work, she pulled me aside to ask what I said to the patient, and I told her every word. Still, she felt the need to tell me that I make her job harder by misinforming patients. She said I should stay at a receptionist level and not help anyone because it causes trouble. I was shocked by how she spoke down to me and still believed that I told the patient I was a nurse and she had something in her eye. All I could muster up was, "Okay, I'm really sorry about that." After that day, I no longer did contact lens trainings, so now appointments are 4 to 5 weeks out instead of 1. I no longer assisted in visual field tests. I put them all on her schedule. Now we don't have any availability for regular appointments until a month and a half later. I stopped offering to help opticians, so if one person was scheduled, all patients will have to wait for that one person for all adjustments, orders, and dispenses. That one had patients very upset with complaints. If anyone had a question about anything unrelated to front desk, I couldn't help them. Even when she would ask, I just told her I didn't feel comfortable doing anything outside of reception anymore. I eventually quit and now work somewhere with a much higher pay and benefits. They've lost a total of 5 out of 11 employees in the span of 1 year, and I heard 2 more are quitting before the end of the year. Edit. To all the people saying I shouldn't have been doing anything I wasn't certified for, you're right, but that isn't how the business was run. I think people were hired based on past experiences and aspirations, whether or not they were likely to stay long. The only licensed people in that office were the optometrists. The opticians and previous tech were not licensed or certified in any way. They still did trainings, visual fields, started dilations, etc. They cross-trained as many of us as possible to maintain productivity. Am I the jerk for not helping my sister with her wedding because I'm not in the bridal party? My sister and I aren't best friends, but we have a pretty good relationship. Good enough that when she got engaged, I assumed that I would either be maid of honor or at least a bridesmaid. She ended up not asking me despite having a bridal party of 10, but I didn't say anything even though I was a little hurt. I totally get that it's her wedding and that I'm not entitled to be in her wedding party, and eventually I got over it. A little afterwards, my best friend got engaged and asked me to be maid of honor, and I happily dived into the responsibility, and it's been a lot of fun for the both of us. I've already been able to plan and execute a lot that has both made the experience fun for my friend and also a lot less stressful. Onto the issue. My sister's maid of honor honestly dropped the ball. I know I'm going to be biased, but I've received complaints from family members and other friends. She hasn't put any effort into helping my sister with her wedding, didn't plan anything, never responds to my sister's messages, and just generally isn't interested at all. None of my sister's other bridesmaids are stepping up either. They all have a reason for why they can't spend more time on my sister's wedding. My sister recently approached me to plan everything for her: bridal shower, bachelorette, and the actual wedding. She wants me to give her the same experience I've given my friend. I was a little offended because she only asked me after she saw what a great job I did for someone else. But she's my sister, so I told her I'd be willing to help if she made me a bridesmaid. I feel like it's the least she could do, and it would make me feel less like an errand girl and really part of the wedding. She refused and said that I'd make the numbers off and that I didn't have the look she was trying to accomplish, which really offended me. Like, at this point, I'm just ticked off. So I said fine, I don't have to be part of the wedding, but then she needs to hire me as a wedding planner because I'm not doing this for free. It takes a huge time commitment to do all of this work. She went crying to my mom and dad now, and they're all calling me a jerk because I should do it as a sister. But she's basically asking me to do hours of work for free, which I feel like isn't fair. Now my family is saying that I'm ruining her special day by being selfish and making it all about me, so I'm starting to doubt myself. Not the jerk. Unrelated to whether you're a bridesmaid or not, that's too much work to expect, demand, or wheedle out of someone. Let her figure something else out and enjoy not having any responsibility as a guest. Wholly entitled princess, Batman. Your sister refused to give you a spot of honor at her wedding, insulted your look, and then cried to mommy and daddy because you're not helping her? How is she even old enough to get married? No, you are not the jerk. And honestly, at this point, I'd consider not even attending as a guest. My Karen mother-in-law refuses to eat my Thanksgiving cooking. This year, I, 32 female, am hosting Thanksgiving at my house, and I've been working all month on coming up with the menu and testing all my recipes. I'm so excited to share my cooking with my family, and my husband, 35 male, has been super supportive and helpful throughout all of the planning and the prep work. I have bought all of the ingredients, and I have a beautiful variety of dishes planned, both traditional and a few unique additions. Well, today, my husband dropped the bombshell on me that mother-in-law wants to bring her own dinner to eat when she comes over. I asked him why she would need to bring her own food when I will have more than enough here. He just made excuses saying, I know how his mother is, grade A picky eater, and she won't like anything that I've prepared. I thought that was ridiculous. I'm not making anything unfamiliar to her, and there will be plenty to choose from. He argued that her bringing her own dinner would be a good compromise, and I disagreed. It would be hugely obvious that she's making a comment on my cooking, and it would be humiliating to have her there eating something completely different in front of everyone. It's like she's trying to make a point of showing that my cooking isn't good enough for her. I think she's being incredibly rude and disrespectful of the time, money, and labor that I've put into this upcoming meal. I told her if she can't eat anything here, then she's welcome to stay home and eat whatever she wants. My husband is now calling me insensitive and petty. He says I'm ruining the holiday. I don't see it that way. I only want friends and family around who are appreciative and kind. I don't need the negativity of someone rejecting everything I've cooked and insulting my cooking when I've worked so hard. This has truly been a labor of love, and I took on this responsibility to share that love with my family and friends. Am I the jerk for not wanting my mother-in-law to come if she's going to reject everything I've made? Edit. Because people are asking, here's what I plan on serving. First, all of the traditional Thanksgiving foods. Roasted turkey, stuffing, classic creamy mashed potatoes, pretty much everything you can think of. How can there not be one thing that she can eat? Update. OMG, there's lots of replies. Thank you all for weighing in. I've been reading your responses, and I've been thinking a lot. And as much as it hurts my feelings, I think the get her with kindness route will be the best thing to do. I'm so overwhelmed and exhausted, and I just want to have a perfect Thanksgiving for everyone. I'll let her know she's welcome, and I'll ignore her and focus on my other guests. I won't let her ruin my day, and I'll be the bigger person. That's what family does, as much as I will be irritated on the inside. Who knows, maybe she'll try something and like it, but if she doesn't, that's okay too. Yes, your mother-in-law is being rude and disrespectful, but uninviting her is not the answer. Here's what you do. Welcome her and her special meal with open arms. Get her back with kindness. Be sure to point out to the other guests, in a lovey-dovey way, if perhaps a wee bit patronizing tone of voice, how mother-in-law has special needs and brought her own food, and you are so glad she could make it, even though eating away from home is so difficult for her. Offer to help her heat up her meal. Tell her it looks absolutely delicious, and ask her for the recipes, and ask her if she could bring one of her wonderful dishes to the next gathering. Meanwhile, you and your other guests can enjoy your fabulous meal, and your mother-in-law can listen to all of the compliments you get for it. Not the jerk. This is one of those situations where the mother-in-law thinks she's embarrassing OP, but she's really embarrassing herself. OP, consider how good you will feel as you watch her get more and more uncomfortable eating her special meal. And consider that if you uninvited her with no explanation, you will look like a jerk. If she brings her own food, she will look like an idiot. Everyone sucks here. Mother-in-law is being rude to refuse your food in this way. Your husband isn't being very supportive of you, and you are escalating things unnecessarily. Your cooking, as much as you've dedicated to it, is not the point of this holiday. Time with family is. Your mother-in-law eating her own food won't be humiliating to you, assuming your food tastes at least decent. The only one that will be looked down on for her decision is her. She's the one behaving strangely. Any judgment will be passed on to her, not you. Be the bigger person. Be the classy, generous hostess. Spoil the rest of your guests with delicious food. Make no comment on mother-in-law's behavior and rise above. Also, is it possible that she has a genuine food issue, such as a sensory thing causing her to struggle with foods? Those do exist, and they're not always diagnosed. If so, going to eat at someone else's house can be a terrifying prospect, and bringing her own food allows her to enjoy the holiday with everyone without having the anxiety about if she'll be able to eat anything. I feel like the majority of food issues on Am I the Jerk posts that I read, the comments absolutely back up the OP wanting to bring their own food due to restriction, allergies, or preference. It's often suggested as a way to still go and enjoy without troubling the host to cater to one specific person. So I'm really confused at all the comments against the mother-in-law because OP perceives her actions as a slight. I think it's hard to say who the jerk is without more info backing up why OP thinks mother-in-law is targeting her and also why it matters so much. If she is trying to slight you, her eating the food and complaining about it will not make the holiday more enjoyable for you. It just won't. And that's what you'll be getting if she comes without her own meal. Bossy coworker does himself out of a promotion. My first job out of high school was a big deal for me. It was a simple data entry job that I took very seriously. I started moving up very quickly. With so many young entry-level employees, turnaround was high, and I guess sticking around made me stand out. I was soaring in that company. Before I knew it, I was a supervisor over a team. In the department I was in, there was only one other supervisor. We worked very well together and agreed on almost everything. The two of us made a full training for our department, a department policy sheet, and conducted all direct employee contact. Our department was doing so well that our manager was recruited by another department for a much more lucrative role in the company. The new manager was the nicest man alive, but as an outside hire, he didn't know anything about how we ran things. At the same time as he was getting acquainted with us, the other supervisor went on maternity leave. I was the only lead in the department left that really knew what they were doing. It sounds rough, but I blossomed under these circumstances. I helped find our new acting supervisor, whom I'll call Trevor. I went into all meetings with my manager to take notes and help him understand what we were discussing. I hired all of the new staff members, from talking to the recruiter, conducting the interviews, and making the call to offer the position. I was running the show and I loved it. Our new manager was not really grasping things and told me he was thinking about leaving. I was sad to see him go. He then told me that he thought he would ask them to have me backfill his position. This would have been the opportunity of a lifetime. A week later, my manager told me that he talked to the director, but the position wasn't going to go to me. It was going to the acting supervisor, Trevor. Apparently, this guy had been schmoozing while I had been working. I hadn't even been paying attention to him. Trevor had become buddy-buddy with the director by spending all his time in his office and going drinking with him at the driving range. I was heartbroken. I wasn't aiming for the job until my boss suggested it to me. I had gotten my hopes up just to be crushed. I tried to shake it off and get back to work. I oversaw department projects. I had one that required thousands of entries on an Excel sheet. I assigned our staff to the project and did my share. At the end of the day, I had gotten the sheets back from everyone directly under me, but nobody on Trevor's team had emailed me theirs. I went to one of their desks and asked them about the project. The person I asked shyly told me that Trevor told her not to do it. When I asked her why he would say that, she told me he said that I wasn't her boss. I was shocked. This is how we had done every project since we had opened the department. What was he thinking, telling people not to do it? I could explain the small ways that Trevor constantly was trying to undermine me or the almost jealous behavior he displayed toward me, but this story is long enough. I'll just say, while shocking, it wasn't out of character for him. I had always been able to keep him from causing damage in the past, and this didn't need to be any different. Then I realized what a golden opportunity this was. I decided to maliciously comply. I just nodded and thanked her for her help. The next day, the director called the manager and supervisors into his office. He asked me why the project wasn't completed the day before. I shrugged and told him I had sent it out to the team like I always do and had even done a chunk of it myself. I looked at Trevor. The look he gave me, he was pale and looked as if he was about to be sentenced. When Trevor eventually tried to explain that he told the staff under him not to do it, the director asked everyone but Trevor to leave. The project had been related to payroll, and Trevor had royally done over the payroll staff. Our director was livid. He was in there for over an hour. I heard the director raise his voice more than once, which was wild. The doors and offices were glass, so when I passed the office a bit later, I saw Trevor with his head down while our director was shaking his head and moving his hands in a very animated manner. A week later, the other supervisor returned, and Trevor was asked to return to his old position under her. I was offered the position of manager soon after, which I gladly accepted. Am I the jerk for offering 2 different kinds of cake at our wedding? My husband, Josh, who's 29, and I, 27 female, just had our wedding a couple of weeks ago, and we mostly got good feedback until today. We had heard that a lot of people have been smack-talking the cake behind our backs. Josh and I originally were going to have a smaller wedding at a resort. We were fortunate enough to be given some money to invite extra guests, so we decided to expand the wedding and have some of our second cousins and their kids, and some friends that we otherwise don't get to see as often. We're on a budget, so we decided to keep the fancy cake, the cutting cake for the pictures, not the real one, for immediate family, and the pastor and a few members of the wedding party that have known us for the longest. We gave them the cake in boxes to take home though, so they wouldn't be eating it in front of everyone else. Minus the pastor, because he flew out from a ways, and he's vegan, so he couldn't eat the dinner, and we wanted him to have something to eat before it got too late. We got a couple of sheet cakes. One was vanilla and buttercream with rosettes, and there was another sheet cake of pineapple chocolate chunk, especially for Josh's side of the family, because they spend a lot of time in Florida. Pineapple chocolate chunk? Ugh. We found out from talking with family that there was a lot of full slices left on people's plates of the pineapple cake. Gee, I wonder why. Which the servers would not take home with them, so we noticed you can see it in a lot of the pictures. We were having too much fun to notice at the time. We loved catching up with all of our guests. Apparently, Josh's family did not like the cake like we thought they would, and there have been some unkind words behind our backs. We got a text from Josh's uncle that wasn't meant for us to see, and it really stung. We're unsure where to go from here and what to say. The cake did not go off like we had hoped for, but we think they're being unnecessarily mean. By the way, there was a full dinner, 3 kinds of cheese, even Monterey Jack available, and an open bar that didn't close until late. So I feel like we were pretty good to our guests on a shoestring budget. Not the jerk, but I'm a bit confused as to what Josh's family spending a lot of time in Florida has to do with deciding to have a pineapple chocolate cake. I lived in Florida for almost a decade, and I can tell you with complete confidence that there is zero connotation between Florida and pineapples. I think you're confusing Florida with Hawaii. But beyond that, the combo of pineapple and chocolate just sounds yucky, and I think that's likely what people are speculating on. Honestly, I wouldn't sweat it. Everyone will forget about it shortly, I'm sure. What matters is if you enjoyed your wedding. I don't think the complaints were about you serving sheet cake, which is totally common at weddings, but rather about the flavor combination of chocolate and pineapples. Feels like you made a random choice based on a bizarre assumption of what people eat in Florida. According to my husband, who used to live in Florida, chocolate pineapple is not a Florida thing. Instead of asking the guests you were trying to cater to, and it sounds like you served the pineapple chocolate cake only to Josh's family instead of asking what they wanted. You're not the jerk for having 2 cakes, but if you didn't give guests an option and then got upset when the cake you thought they wanted wasn't eaten, then yes, you're the jerk. Edit. From your comments, it's clear that you decided who got which cake and expected them to trade plates if they weren't happy. So yeah, you're the jerk. You're the jerk. You didn't get a vegan meal for your pastor who flew a long distance to officiate. You openly distributed 3 cakes, which very clearly were of different levels, and chose who got what. You served one side of the family before the other. You assumed that people could trade cake flavors with strangers. You decided that chocolate pineapple would be the best flavor for his family because they've spent time in Florida. What? Honestly, I'd say you're a bad host rather than a jerk because you seem to have meant well, but your planning decisions are inhospitable and indefensible. Chocolate pineapple cake. Ew. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her guests? Please let us know.
Chocolate pineapple cake? I'm sorry, but I think I'm gonna be sick.
Am I the jerk for refusing to go to my wife's deceased husband's family's house for Thanksgiving? I'm 36, male, and my wife, 33, female, lost her first husband several years ago from a brain aneurysm. They had 2 boys together, who are 7 and 6, and I've made my peace with the fact that she will always love him. She even has a sort of shrine to him in our home, and I would never ask her to remove it. We got married only a couple of years ago, and last Thanksgiving, she asked me to come with her to Thanksgiving at her former in-laws' house. Apparently, she's gone to their house for Thanksgiving since her first husband passed. I support this as it's a way for her to stay connected to her first husband's family and also since it's a way for her 2 kids to maintain a relationship with their father's side of the family. So I went last year. It was a little uncomfortable, but her late husband's family treated me really well. They were very kind and welcoming to me. It wasn't a bad Thanksgiving, but it was still really awkward and I felt very out of place. This year, my wife is trying to get me to go back, but I just want to go have Thanksgiving with my own family. I've invited her along, but also told her that I understand if she doesn't want to go, but that we should be moving forward. But if she doesn't want to, fine, but that she shouldn't try to make me go to Thanksgiving at her late husband's family's home. She's responded that we can have Christmas, Easter, the 4th of July, etc. with either her family or my family, but that she's pledged Thanksgiving to her late husband's family and that I should come with her as her husband to support her. I don't want to. I think it's weird and morbid. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. This isn't just her late husband's family. This is her children's paternal family. Did you think you'd step in and your family would be a substitute? It does not work that way. It's one holiday a year for your stepkids to spend with their father's family. She offered up every other holiday. If you didn't want a connection to that part of the family, you should not have married a widow with kids. You're the jerk. Suck it up for the kids and your wife. You and your new family will all benefit if the kids have healthy relationships with their paternal grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Don't turn down extra sources of love and support for your wife and the kids. You're the jerk. I understand it's not comfortable, but the kids, they're going to want to know the dad they didn't get to know. Yet, the dad they do know is uncomfortable with it. You don't technically owe him or his parents any favors, but you are raising his kids. You're going to be their dad and do all of the things that this other guy and his parents probably dreamed about. If you only see them one day a year, you can use that to learn one thing about this other guy, and you can tell the kids about it on a random day. He's not your competition. You and him are on the same team, and if you can be a part of keeping his memory alive for those kids, even if it's something small, that shrine is going to go away. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for canceling my ex-boyfriend's plane ticket, leaving him homeless and unable to get to his family? A brief history. I met my now ex-boyfriend while doing volunteer work. Frankly, he's not been the nicest to me. He's just nice enough, just often enough to have had me convinced that he loved me. It's easier to see in retrospect. A few weeks before this incident, I booked both of us plane tickets to Germany. He needs to go there to stay with his family as he doesn't have anywhere else to live now that his current lease is up. The plan was for him to fly one way and for me to go with him for a short stay, then return home by myself. We were supposed to leave today. Now on to what happened. In between his lease ending and flying abroad, X has been staying at a friend's house in a more rural town, and I was invited to visit while his friend was away. We got to the house and my ex started making dinner for us. We were joking back and forth, being affectionate, and then in one moment, he flipped. I had gone to hug him when he wanted to peel potatoes, and he just started yelling. I honestly cannot come up with a bigger reason for him losing his temper aside from that hug. It was so out of the blue. And I'll admit, in that moment, I had a panic attack. My distress only served to escalate his anger. He told me to get out, and that there was a bus stop down the street, that I'd better hope to get there in time. I gathered my things and left, and thankfully did manage to catch a bus. After that initial period of shock, I realized I could never go back to him. I definitely couldn't go to a foreign country with him. I went to the airline's website to cancel my flights, and there was his booking too. I canceled it in an impulsive, numb moment. I didn't even get a refund because it's an economy airline. A few days ago, he texted me as though nothing had happened, asking for his flight details. I replied that there was no flight, that of course I wasn't going to pay to go to Germany with him after what had happened. He sent a long reply saying I knew he had nowhere else to go, that I knew he was struggling with money, and that I had effectively made him homeless, and he hopes I'm pleased with myself. I honestly didn't know what to say in return, but luckily I haven't heard from him since. I don't know if he's been able to get a flight himself, and a tiny part of me does worry for him. Am I the jerk? P.S. I paid for both our tickets with my own money. We never discussed this explicitly, but I just assumed he would pay me back at some point. Since then, it has become quite clear that that's never going to happen. This may or may not contribute to my Am I the Jerk verdict. I'm not sure. Not the jerk. You paid for his ticket and had not been reimbursed. He clearly has a friend he's able to stay with temporarily, so now he just needs to start figuring out his way home. Not the jerk. He was a jerk and you don't deserve that. Getting home is officially his problem, not yours. Good for you, knowing your worth. Karen stole my car. I've been with my wife for 4 years. I have a 20-year-old daughter, and she and my wife were never able to form a strong bond, and one of the reasons for that is distance. My wife did try to get close to my daughter in the past, but my daughter claimed she was just attempting to control her rather than have a respectful relationship with her. They had past issues, but now get along a bit. My daughter was visiting for Thanksgiving and brought her Honda car with her. I was out of the house when my wife, whose car had been sitting in the garage for a month now, took my daughter's car keys without her permission while she was showering and left in it for nearly 2 hours. My daughter called me as soon as she got out of the bathroom and was freaking out, saying neither her car or my wife were there. I tried to calm her down as I tried to get a hold of my wife, but she did not respond. We at this point figured my wife took the car but did not know where she was or when she was coming back. My daughter searched my wife's closet, then called the cops and reported her car taken. She called back to tell me my wife's closet was half empty and cops were called. I got off work and went home immediately, and on the way home, my wife called, crying. She just got picked up by the cops at Walmart and was brought into the station. I went over there and met my daughter there. We discussed what happened, and it turned out my wife took the car to go do some shopping and left my daughter a note in the kitchen to let her know since she doesn't have her number, and took clothes from her closet she packed earlier in the morning for church donations. But my daughter thought she ran away and told the cops that this woman, my wife, ran away with her car. My daughter got her car back and my wife was let go after filling out a form. I took her home, and that is where she had a fight with my daughter, calling her crazy for calling the cops on her and a few other things I can't remember. But I told my wife what she did was unacceptable and she should be grateful my daughter only called the cops in a moment of panic and did not press charges after what she did. My wife was shocked and started crying, saying she couldn't believe I sided with my daughter after she humiliated her and caused her panic and to be involved with the cops like that. I stated she should have not touched the car in the first place, and she defended herself, saying she was getting things done and buying stuff we needed for the house, but we made her out to be the bad guy. She left to her sister's place, saying she had had enough of my daughter's disgraceful and vindictive attitude towards her, and said she'll stay there indefinitely or until I get my priorities straight, because after what happened, she's no longer sure if she is my wife or whether she was treated as such. My wife's car isn't working and has been in the garage for a while now. That is why she took my daughter's car. Not the jerk. She stole a car. I mean, there are consequences to Grand Theft Auto. They even made a video game about it. If she wanted to borrow the car, she needed to ask permission. Skipping that step puts you right in the felony theft category. Everyone sucks here. This whole story makes no sense. Okay, she took her car without asking, which, depending on the family, might not even be that weird. Why did nobody find that note? Why didn't you just wait for her to return? Why the panic? Who the heck goes straight to the closet to make such crazy assumptions that she just left? Who just calls the police on a rational, grown family member over borrowing something without asking once? I would get it if this was repeatedly. This was such an exaggerated chain of events, I cannot follow your thought process at all. I feel like there's a lot missing here and a lot of motives and dynamics that are unspecified. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP's daughter or his wife? Please let us know.
This is why you don't marry a Karen. If I was your daughter, I'd press charges.
I called my brother-in-law pathetic at our family dinner. I, female 24, have a sister, female 32, who has a husband who's 38, who's the poster child of weaponized incompetence. They have 4 kids, who are 10, 8, 5, and 3, and she's pregnant. My sister works a full-time job, over 40 hours a week, cleans her entire house, cooks, takes care of all her kids without him doing anything. It's seriously mind-blowing that she wakes up at like 4 a.m., cooks breakfast, does chores, gets all of her kids ready for school, takes them all to school and daycare, and all he does is stay home and work. And when his kids get home, after my sister picks them up of course, he will play with them for a little and play video games until he falls asleep. She actually makes more than him. My fiance, male 26, and I had to stay with them for 6 weeks while our home was being renovated, and since we both work from home, we helped her. and it's amazing how much happier she is when she has help. I helped with the kids, and my fiance even drove her to the doctor's appointments. Her husband literally only acknowledges he is a parent when his family is around. Then he is a God-fearing, hard-working father of 5. He's the one that wanted more kids. She wanted to stop after her last baby, but he needed more boys. I'm seriously concerned not only for her, but her kids as well, because now her oldest is seeing what's happening and trying to help, but my sister is prideful and refuses to let her kid do anything. Me and this man have never gotten along. He's been acting like this since their 8-year-old was born. I've tried talking to her about leaving, but she doesn't want her kids to grow up in a broken home. And unfortunately, her experience with our parents' divorce was completely different than mine, so she doesn't understand that a divorce would benefit her kids here because she thinks they need their mom and dad together. Cut to this past weekend. Her and her husband threw a pre-Thanksgiving potluck where our entire family, plus his, was there. I stayed with my sister a few days before because I knew he wouldn't help. So we're at dinner, all talking, and I mention we are trying for a baby, and my brother-in-law makes an offhanded comment to him about how hard fatherhood is, and I snapped and said, "Like you would know." He looked taken aback and asked me what I meant, and I unloaded on him, calling him a pathetic excuse for a man who makes my 8 months pregnant sister do everything for their family. I went off for a solid 10 minutes, and he sat there shrinking in his seat. I left. Last night, my sister called me and thanked me for standing up for her and told me she appreciated me. Although today I got a very nasty text from him telling me I'm a terrible person, and because I lied in front of his family, his mom is angry at him and is moving in with them to help her out, and I've made him the laughingstock of his family. He certainly thinks so, but am I the jerk for doing this? Not the jerk. Not even a justified jerk, as some comments suggest. You had a breaking point, and he was taking credit for the kid's upbringing that your sister single-handedly should be thanked for. He knows he's in the wrong, which is why he sat quietly and kept pretending in front of his family. He would have driven your sister into an early grave. His true colors are bound to come out sooner or later when his mother has moved in. He will not be able to pull the facade forever. When that happens, he will either have to change properly or risk losing the support of his family. All of it is starting with you speaking up for your sister against his lies. Well done. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk for calling out her brother-in-law or not? Please let us know.
That guy sounds even more worthless than you, Reddit boy.
Am I the jerk for making my cousin angry at her husband for not getting her pregnancy cravings for her? I've had a lot of weird and oddly specific pregnancy cravings. So far, my husband has gotten me every single one without fail. A few days ago, my cousin, who is also pregnant, and her husband were visiting. While they were here, I got this random craving for these brownies I had from a bakery in France. I mentioned it to my cousin and her husband because I wanted to know if she was also having these oddly specific cravings. She told me she did, and it was horrible because her husband almost never got them for her. I said that wasn't nice of him, and I would be upset if my husband acted like that. Her husband got defensive and said he actually got her the food she was craving a lot, and that there was a limit to how many times he should be expected to run around after the food she was craving. He kept telling me my husband wouldn't get me my French brownies. We live in Europe, but not France, even though I knew he would, because I've had even more ridiculous cravings before, and he found a way to get them for me. I told him I would ask my husband since he never believed me to prove a point, and he was so confident that my husband would say no, which he obviously didn't. The brownies came after several hours, and the longer it was taking, the more arrogant her husband got. So I was very happy when they arrived. My cousin was visibly upset at her husband for the rest of their visit. My cousin's husband asked my husband if he had got them just to prove my point, but my husband said he got them because I said I was craving them, and that French brownies were much easier to get than some of the other cravings I've had. Cousin's husband asked about what other cravings I've had and was upset when he realized I knew I would get the brownies if I asked. Before they left, he called me out on setting him up to look bad and claims his wife is mad at him because of me. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. You basically used your husband as a performance animal to show off in front of your cousin and her husband. It's great that your husband has the ability to keep up with your cravings. Just because someone else may not have the same ability doesn't make them a bad husband or lesser husband. You wanted to brag and show off and caused a fight between your cousin and her husband. Make no mistake, I understand exactly where your husband is coming from. I tried to fulfill all of my wife's cravings both times she was pregnant. I would have been upset with her had she used me as a pawn to try to gloat or make someone else look bad though. Instead of appreciating your husband and his efforts, you use him to show your cousin how much better your husband is than hers. Good for you, I guess. Everyone sucks here. Good lord. The whole lot of you just sound insufferable, except your cousin. Cravings are totally a thing, but what a weird flex for you to prove how terrified your husband is of you to make him leave the country to get some brownies. Not brownies in general, mind you, which would be honestly a reasonable request, but an extremely specific thing that sounds like required momentous effort on his part to satisfy. And for what? So you could make her husband look bad? Granted, it sounds like her husband could be doing more to help her, but you're just way over the top, and I don't get why your husband is on board with this. Not the jerk. To be honest, I would do the same thing. As men themselves will never have to be pregnant, the least they can do is run a few errands here and there. They've basically had it made since the dawn of time. If he's too much of a baby to run to the store for a pregnant woman, I don't know why you'd stay with him, to be honest. And lol at everyone who was triggered by this story. If it legit made you upset, you are literally part of the problem and should seriously check your privilege. My Karen neighbor demands I let her kids play in my yard even after they graffitied my house. My father bought the house in the 80s and held on to it as different developments sprung up around it. I inherited it 3 years ago and have been living in it since. I have 2 acres, while my surrounding neighbors have maybe half an acre if they're lucky. The house is fairly small, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, so I have a very large front and backyard. I use maybe 1/5 of the backyard as a garden, and the rest is basically an empty field. I've always loved kids, so I was happy to let my neighbor's kids play in the field with the understanding that they would respect the property. Most of the kids are great, very respectful, and understand that this is not their yard. The problem is with my neighbors to the right. They have 5 kids, who are 1, 3, 5, 5, and 7, who generally run around unsupervised. They don't come to my yard to play very often unless the other kids are playing soccer or baseball. The 7-year-old is in charge, as much as a 7-year-old can be, but obviously he can't replace parental supervision. 5 days ago, the kids were playing baseball, and he must have lost track of the 5-year-old at some point, because when I came home from work, I found their names sharpied onto my wall, along with some rude drawings. I found their parents the next day and asked them to pay for the paint I'll need to cover it up. They were very offended, accused me of lying, and said they weren't going to pay. If this had been all, I probably would have let it slide and covered the paint since it would only be like $20. But later that day, one of their 5-year-olds decided it would be funny to throw rocks at my house. There are several dents in the siding where the rocks hit, and 2 of my windows are broken. From what I've been quoted to fix, it's about $800 to $900 worth of damage. I talked to the parents, who accused me of doing it myself to make their kids look bad. I've decided those 5 are not allowed to use my yard until the damage is paid for, which I think is more than fair. When they came by this morning to play soccer with the other kids, I politely explained the situation and said they would have to leave as they aren't allowed to play here anymore. The 7-year-old was very upset, more sad than a temper tantrum, which is understandable, but the 5-year-olds were both very angry. About an hour later, their mom came by and went off on me, yelling at my doorstep about how I'm a horrible person who can't stand kids because I'm bitter and can't find a husband. I'm standing my ground either way, but a few other parents came by and seemed a little frustrated by my explanation as to why that family is no longer welcome, which is making me question things. Am I the jerk for banning them from playing here? Edit. To answer some common concerns. I will be installing cameras. I dug my dad's old trail cams out of the garage, so I'll put those up either tonight or tomorrow. I am aware of the liability issues with kids playing in my yard. I'm willing to risk it. I don't want to put up a fence. I think they're ugly. The property line is clearly marked. I will not be banning the entire neighborhood unless I absolutely have to. Edit 2. I also have a meeting scheduled with my attorney to discuss the possibility of drawing up a liability waiver for the parents to sign. Forgot to put that in the last edit. They're also usually unsupervised. Typically, there's a parent or 2 hanging around anyway, and I work from home, so the kids know to knock on my door and ask me to watch them if their parents are busy. I'm also looking into an umbrella policy that would be more likely to cover any injuries that occur. Not the jerk, not one bit. I'm worried that this might escalate and the family will cause further damage to your property out of anger. I'd get some cameras set up if I were you. to protect yourself and so you have definite proof if or when there is a next time. You're the jerk for not calling the police. Are you really just going to pay $800 and not allow them in the yard? How about they pay and they're still not allowed over? And if they come, you call for trespass. You're the jerk. As a mother of 6 myself, our kids need a place to stay and have fun. You can't expect us to take them to the park every single day. Kids are supposed to run around the neighborhood and get in trouble. That's how I grew up, and believe it or not, I turned out just fine. If you live in a neighborhood with other people, like it or not, you're going to have kids running around. You know, being kids. Trust me, no parents like dealing with a grumpy old neighbor who complains about everything that their kids do. If it were up to people like you, my kids would be stuck inside 24/7, being quiet as a mouse. I've had neighbors complain before about just about everything. My kids screaming, leaving trash in their yards, my dogs barking too much, you name it. I tell them the same thing every time. Don't like having neighbors? How about you move out to the middle of nowhere where you belong, since you're unable to deal with living in an actual neighborhood? My kids have been playing outside all day, and the boomer neighbors are sitting on their deck right now. I already know they're going to be calling the HOA again like they always do. What they don't know is that I'm friends with the head of the HOA, and every time we talk, we laugh about him and his BS. Bottom line, if you can't stand living next door to a family, just go live somewhere rural where we won't have to deal with your complaining.
Well, don't you sound like a pleasant neighbor?
Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you let them keep playing in your yard or not? Please let us know.
I'd get a couple of big, mean, hungry dogs is what I'd do. Ruff.
I called the police on my entitled son. For context, I, female 35, have a son that was born when I was married to my first husband. I was young when he was born, and his father was horrible to me. My ex-husband's mom was constantly in our lives, trying to take over and make my son hers. I left my ex when I was in my early 20s, and my ex-mother-in-law ended up taking my son into another state and filing for custody. She went to a state that has grandparents' rights, as ours didn't. I fought her for years and ended up getting remarried to my current spouse, and we had a son together when I was in my mid-20s, a boy who is now 10. I see my oldest son only during the summer and the holidays. I finally got the court case moved to our local court, and the judge says that I was wronged and ordered shared custody and visitation. My ex-mother-in-law made a huge deal that my son needed to stay with her during the week because of school, and the judge went with it so he could finish high school in an environment where he was familiar. My ex-mother-in-law has ruined my son, just like she did her own. She's given him any and everything he's wanted, she's taught him no respect, and kept him very sheltered. She literally jumps on people if they don't give him his way. So in turn, my son is loud, violent, and all around sad to be around. So he came up to visit during Halloween, and he acted awful. My husband's mom lives with us, and she isn't well. She's doing chemo. She's been a big help with my youngest son so that I could help my husband with our business. My youngest is a delight to be around. He's polite, funny, and respectful. We've taught him that you don't expect anything unless you work for it. I went and picked my oldest up, and his attitude started right away because his phone died and the charger I had in the truck didn't fit his phone. He wanted me to get off the interstate and buy him an overpriced one from a truck stop or something. I told him no, I'd get him one when we got into town, and that next time he needs to remember to bring one for the house and for the car. I suggested making a packing list ahead of time. Now my youngest was in the back with his tablet playing quietly, and my oldest realized the tablet was plugged into a car charger. He asked his younger brother for the charger, and I told him it's an Apple charger. It won't work with your Android. My oldest said, "You don't know that. Shut up." Next thing I know, he's forcibly taking the Apple charger and is trying to fit it into his phone. When it didn't work, he threw it into the back seat of the truck. My youngest just plugged his tablet back up without a word, but I told my oldest that his behavior wasn't acceptable. Fast forward to the next day. Older son is still fuming at me because I made him wait, bad-mouthed me to his grandma, etc. I left to go to the office, as did my husband, and my mother-in-law was going to take my youngest son to the treat trail for Halloween. She asked other son if he wanted to go, and he told her to kick rocks. My husband told him not to speak to her like that. I knew trouble was brewing, I just didn't know how bad. Apparently, mother-in-law and younger son went to the treat trail, and older son called mother-in-law to tell her he wanted Hardee's, also known as Carl's Jr. My mother-in-law told him there was food at home and that it would be a while before she could get in. Older son told her that she needed to bring it right now. My mother-in-law told him to either eat what was at the house or wait. He lost it on her and hung up on her. Mother-in-law called me, and I told her not to reward his bad behavior. I told her we had plans to go out later to eat. He could wait. So when mother-in-law gets home, she tries to open the door and her key won't work. Older son comes to the door and tells her that he's angry and doesn't want her in the house, so he locked her out. He told her to wait outside until he either felt like opening the door or until I came home. My mother-in-law told him to open the door ASAP. She called me crying and I went off. I called older son and told him he didn't make the rules in my house. He went by them and that he would be punished if he didn't open the door. He really thought I was playing. I left the office and went home. Cue disaster. I opened the door and older son was there on the other side. Mother-in-law and younger son had been waiting in her car and older son was blocking threshold, saying that he had told mother-in-law to keep outside, that it was her punishment for telling him no. I told him to move now. I tried to push past him and he pushed me back outside, threatening to lock us all out. I went to go inside again and he put his hand in my face and pushed me back out. I told him, that's it, I'm calling the police. He didn't think I was serious, but I did it. I told the dispatcher that my older son was refusing to let me into my own home and had put his hands on me. Older son goes into a rage, and I mean a pure rage. He comes out of the door, screaming and threatening, tries to take my phone, and the lady tells me she'll send someone ASAP. I mean, I had to literally fight him to keep him from breaking my phone. Then he goes after my younger son and starts saying horrible things to him. My mother-in-law locks herself and my younger son in the car as my older son proceeds to kick and punch the car. He even cracked the windows in the window shield. Older son goes after mother-in-law just as my husband pulls up. He's telling mother-in-law this is her fault, that she just needed to do what he said. My husband tries to restrain older son, and older son is screaming that he will have my husband arrested, etc. The police came, and they immediately restrained older son and put him into the back of the van. My husband and I explained the situation, and I told the officer that my ex-mother-in-law had shared custody. So the officer calls ex-mother-in-law and tells her what's happening. He puts her on speaker, and she immediately puts the blame on us, saying we provoked him and we were mistreating him. The officer told her that didn't seem to be the case, as a neighbor had come forward and said she had called 911 also, plus had a security camera that showed the entire thing. Ex-mother-in-law jumps to saying the police here can't do anything with older son as he's a resident of another state, blah blah blah. The cop tells ex-mother-in-law that's not the case, and it seems like older son needs to learn his lesson. The officer hangs up and ex-mother-in-law immediately calls me. I put her on speakerphone. She's not the smartest, yet thinks she is. If I had older son arrested, that I would be a bad mom and that he was justified in what he had said and done. I asked her about the true son thing, and she said he was my only heir, as he was my first son, and from my first marriage, and divorce is a sin. I told her that's not how it works. I told her I'm tired of him taking my home over and trying to hurt others. Long story short, he spent 3 days in jail before a hearing, and the judge asked me what I wanted to do. So older son is being sent to a group home. My ex-mother-in-law fought the entire way, but had no hold because both officers and my neighbor gave statements. Now ex-mother-in-law is saying I'm ruining his life and I'm a bad parent. She's also accusing my husband of mistreating him. Okay, so I've noticed a lot of comments saying I abandoned my son, gave him to his paternal grandma, etc. That's not the case. I live in a Commonwealth state with no grandparents' rights, and she had 25 plus years of residency in a state that does have them. When I left her son, my ex-husband, she became furious. In her home state, a grandparent has the right to intervene in the child's life during the parent's divorce, and she used that to her advantage. A judge in her home state granted her visitation with my son, even though he was born in my state. During a visit, she filed for custody and was granted it until the divorce was finalized. The divorce took over 2 years due to my ex not wanting to sign papers and being difficult, so older son was almost 10 when it was finalized. I got something called a change of venue accepted, and the custody case was transferred to my local court, where it should have been there the entire time. Of course, ex-mother-in-law wasn't going to willingly hand him over, so she kept filing appeals, continuances, and other things to prolong the case. It eventually went from family court to circuit court, which is also known as high court for that judge to decide. By this time, older son was at the legal age where he could have a voice in court and was established at school in ex-mother-in-law's area. The judge said that he could finish school there and then be transferred up here for school. My ex-husband had signed his parental rights over to his mom, and the judge had to take that into consideration. He did this to avoid the state going after him for support. The local judge ordered ex-mother-in-law to do therapy as well as older son, and there were issues with them not complying. My ex-mother-in-law ruined her own son. He's in his 30s, won't work, doesn't drive, and expects her to keep him up. I did nothing wrong aside from leaving my horrible ex-husband. The recent psych evaluation said older son lacks empathy for others and has delusions of grandeur, meaning he thinks he's better than others. Ex-mother-in-law also had to do a session, and the therapist said ex-mother-in-law is similar in regards and that her expectations aren't realistic. They both have superiority complexes. My ex-mother-in-law used to lock me out of my own home because she wanted to punish me or limit my contact with my own son. When she took him, I did contact local and state police, but they couldn't go into her state without the permission of officials there, and by then she had filed paperwork. She had nothing to use against me, would not abide by court-set visitation, etc. I have 2 homes, a business, and I'm very self-sufficient. My family life is good, not dysfunctional. We've done everything we can to incorporate my son into our family, but he's refused to accept us. I'm sorry I was a crappy mom for not allowing him to lock me out of my own darn house. Holy cow, you did the right thing. Your son is a threat to everyone in your house, and his grandmother is doing him no favors. Get him the help he needs. Don't abandon him, but don't risk your family's safety. I would be very careful from now on. Your older son will blame you for everything, and your ex-mother-in-law will probably stroke that fire. Set up cameras, and make sure you let the police know when he's released, because with all the rage he displayed, revenge might be on the cards. Also, where is his father in all this? Did he just walk away and let Mummy take over? Your ex-mother-in-law created a psychopath. Way to go, Granny. You really need to think about safety right now. Your son will not be locked up forever. You need cameras and a loud house alarm. Make sure cameras overlook your vehicles. Oh yeah, your 10-year-old is a sweetie. Am I the jerk for saying my boyfriend's roommate can't come to Thanksgiving dinner? Me, 26, female, and my boyfriend, 34, male, have been dating for nearly a year and a half now. Tomorrow, he's coming to Thanksgiving dinner at my dad's house and meeting my family for the first time. I'm extremely family-oriented, and it's so important to me that he's finally meeting them. This also means the world to my family because I rarely bring men home, and they've been wanting to meet him for a long time. He's aware of this and how much this meeting means to me, and has assured me that he's looking forward to it too. This afternoon, he asked if his roommate could come too. I was caught off guard and said no. I didn't even ask my family, who I'm sure would say yes, but it's a hard boundary for me. I barely know his roommate, but he's military and won't be able to be with his own family for the holiday, which is why my boyfriend asked. I understand and appreciate his compassion and kindness, but I need this event to be just him, me, and my family, without his buddy who's a stranger to me. I called him to talk through it, but he's extremely upset and wasn't really responding. I asked if he's still coming, and he said yes. Then I asked if he's okay, and he said no, but that he will be. I told him to reach out to me when he's ready, and that I understand if he doesn't want to talk to me right now, so I haven't heard from him since the phone call a couple of hours ago. I feel like a massive jerk, but this is one of the rare events where I've put my foot down in this relationship and refused to accommodate his wants. So, am I the jerk? Update. For more clarity, and because people are making a lot of unfounded assumptions, I have briefly met his roommate, hi and bye, on multiple occasions. We barely know each other though, because he has a schedule that makes it so he's rarely around when I am, and we've never had the opportunity to have a full conversation surpassing basic greetings. I made it very clear that I'd love to have him and include him in my family, but the first meeting between my parents and boyfriend wasn't the place to do so. My boyfriend has not met my family because I'm very particular about who I bring home and will not bring home someone unless I'm 100% comfortable that this is the correct choice. I'm protective of my family and don't want them to get attached. I get it's unconventional, but it's my choice, and every party involved respects that. I ended up apologizing to my boyfriend, asking my parents, and inviting his roommate, who wasn't aware my boyfriend had asked about him coming. He can't even come anyways. I appreciated the comments, even the ones calling me a heartless monster, but no one is put out in the end. Not the jerk. You're allowed to set whatever boundaries you want, but don't be surprised if, after thinking it over, he decides it's a deal breaker. People in the military often tend to become family to each other, so from his point of view, you're basically telling him he has to leave a brother alone because your heart isn't big enough to include him. He'll probably honor his commitment to your family to attend, but I'll be very surprised if the relationship lasts past this weekend. A. It doesn't say boyfriend is military though. And B, if he were, if the guy is so important to him, maybe he should have introduced him a bit better to his girlfriend. I think no jerks here is a good call. Just don't agree that it should be a deal breaker, or that there should be shade for her heart not being big enough. Edit. Never mind, I saw a comment about them both being military. I still think in this case though, the boyfriend should have made sure she knew him better before springing a last-minute ask like this on her though. OP isn't hosting. If OP was hosting and he asked to invite the roommate, that would be fine. But to ask her family to host a stranger just because boyfriend is invited is odd, especially when OP doesn't know the guy well. Not the jerk. First of all, asking the day before the event is rude in my opinion, especially for something that involves a lot of cooking. If you truly don't know the guy, it's also rude of your boyfriend to want to invite a stranger to your family's house for a holiday. Yes, maybe Thanksgiving is supposed to be about generosity and giving, but I would not be comfortable asking my parents if a stranger can come to our house for Thanksgiving. My dad is military, so I get the whole being away from your family for the holidays. But if the man is in his 30s, it's likely not his first Thanksgiving away from home. And why would he want to spend it with strangers? I don't know. Your boyfriend has the right to be upset about the decision, but you also have the right to say no. It's weird to me. If you knew the guy, then yeah, you'd be the jerk for saying no. But he's almost a stranger, so no thank you. If this was Valentine's Day or your parents' anniversary, I'd understand better. Thanksgiving and Christmas are typically about giving and generosity. I think it would have been better for everyone if you had let the roommate join. I personally think it would have been good to see the boyfriend interact with people he just met along with someone he's comfortable with. On the other hand, now, your boyfriend has seen this side of you and he may not like it. Was it worth the risk of him thinking differently of you? Soft, you're the jerk. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her boyfriend? Please let us know. Corporate said so. I used to sling pizza, and I had this one couple who would regularly come in and order a specialty pizza, think meat lovers, but with 3 times the amount of toppings, like extra everything. Plus, they would add extra of other toppings that weren't originally on the pizza, like olives and onions. So of course, this meant that it never cooked thoroughly, even after sending it through the oven twice. Every single time they would complain about the pizza being too burnt on the edges and not cooked enough, and it took too long, and that they also wanted more of the toppings. I tried repeatedly to explain to them that every extra topping you add makes the portion size of all the toppings go down. I don't even understand why we were allowed to add so many toppings on at the register. Anyways, about the 5th or 6th time I replaced the pizza for them, because they kept complaining to corporate and received credit, the man came in again and said they spoke to corporate and corporate wants me to make the pizza the way they want it. I knew that this wasn't true. There really wasn't a corporate customers could call, just a call center, and those people did not care. But I decided I'd do exactly as they asked, but made sure to explain to them that if I made it their way and it didn't turn out well, they wouldn't be getting any more remakes. I took the order and made it as they were expecting, kind of. I put full portions of each topping on that monster. To say that the pizza was a mountain is an understatement. It didn't even fit in the oven. I had to take toppings off of it. I did feel a little bad at this point, knowing full well they paid, with the store credit, over $40 for this one pizza, and there was no way it would ever cook properly. So I did give it 2 runs through the oven, but that still didn't help. It was pan-to-pan toppings, so getting out of the pan sucked, and I just put it and cut it right in the box so the toppings wouldn't fall everywhere. After I cut it, the slices disappeared under the toppings, and you couldn't even see crust, so it just looks like a giant pile of trash toppings dumped in a box. I couldn't even close it. I brought it to the customer, and he started to lose it on me, saying it took too long, and it looked like a mess, and he wanted another credit. I pulled out his receipt and asked which part wasn't up to par. He said it didn't look cooked, and I reminded him how I warned him that this is what would happen with the amount of toppings we were using. I showed him the crust underneath and went through all of the toppings and the extras. Everything was accounted for as he had asked, so I told him I'd let management and corporate know that it was made to his liking. Never saw them again. Neighbor is big mad about my racetrack. Okay, so it finally happened today. Last spring, my family moved into our dream home. We had bought the property years ago, and through lockdown, finally were able to get our dream home built. The property is essentially in the middle of nowhere, with the nearest neighbor being about a mile down the road. On the few hundred acres we have, I decided to do my best at recreating some professional drift tracks from Drift Masters European Championship and Formula Drift. We were able to create one-for-one models of Wall, New Jersey, Irwindale, California, Texas, Poland, Seattle, Englishtown, New Jersey. Everything is up to code and greenlit by the county. We plan to open a drift school on the property in the future. We've also built 6 cars to 800 horsepower. I list all this because it is loud and smoky here on the farm a lot, and for the past 7 or 8 months, we've had absolutely no issues, minus a trespasser destroying his car and our shed. Today, that changed. I have some family in town for the holiday, and among them are my cousin, who's 39, and his son, who's 17. Having grown up drifting with my cousin, we were super hyped to take his boy out and slide around the track, so we grabbed a couple of the track cars and cut loose. About 40 minutes into it, and as we were swapping out tires, I hear sirens and step out of the garage. Coming down my driveway are 2 fire engines, a couple of police cars, and an SUV. They all park and hop out, and I ask how I can help them. They ask about a fire along with noise, to which I explain the drift cars and motion to all of the racetrack around the property. I show them my county documents, which allow for the tracks, etc. At this point, my apparent neighbor, male in his 50s, I've never met, starts yelling about the noise and how I should be arrested. The sergeant who had shown up with a gaggle of responders stopped him and informed me that we aren't doing anything illegal, and so as long as we keep our noise to before 10 p.m. on weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends, we are within the law. Neighbor called us some really not nice names before turning and going off on the sergeant. We specifically chose this property to build on as it's zoned commercial and automotive, on top of residential. The fire department left almost as soon as they arrived. After the neighbor had his meltdown, he was trespassed by the police department. A couple of the police hung around and watched us hit a few laps. I offered to take them out and even teach them if they would like, free of charge. They then left too. I come here to ask Reddit, am I the jerk for building a giant race facility at my home, which is located in the most appropriate area one can find? Update. Neighbor just came back to knock on my door and tell me that we will no longer be racing cars on our property, threatened to destroy the vehicles, and was all but foaming at the mouth. Police came, he called them, and they immediately arrested him for trespassing. This guy is going to be a great neighbor. Ugh. Edit. We do have trail cams all around the property. No one can get in without being seen. There are numerous inside the property too. Thanks for all the concern. Well, I recently bought a little house at the limit of a very small town, and one of the things I cherish there is the silence. But if you decided to open a branch there with all the paperwork done, I just would have to sell and leave. No need to go through the worrying, trespassing, or having a heart attack. It will not change the end result. I mean, if he can hear you, that sucks for him. You don't move to the countryside to listen to cars going around a track. You know, you have the law on your side, but I sympathize with your neighbor. Imagine living far from everything and enjoying your peace and quiet until a new neighbor builds a racetrack. There might be a reason he lives where he does. Maybe he has horses or other animals that get spooked every time you race. I can think of lots of scenarios where a racetrack is highly disturbing for someone who wants silence away from a big city. Have you had any conversations with him at all? Maybe all of this can be resolved if you simply talk to him and try to understand his point of view in all this. You're not alone on this planet, and the sounds and smells you produce reach far beyond your property lines. Yes, it's lawful, but it's also really frustrating when the peace of your home is shattered by someone setting up business in proximity to your home. A home you bought partly due to the peace and quiet. It also tends to decrease the value of neighboring property as they cannot, for example, enjoy their garden without all of the revving. You say it's a mile from your property to your neighbors, but is the track a mile away, or does it come significantly closer to your neighbors since it encircles your land? First, I'm so jealous of your racetrack. If your neighbor wants to sell their home, let me know. I will move to live next door to you. Don't tell my friends because they'll try to outbid me for this house. I can see why your neighbor is mad, although his home is built in an area that is zoned for it. I think people never imagine someone's going to build a racetrack next door. Most people are not aware that the area they live in is zoned for it. That's still not your fault or your problem. If he hates it that much, he'll move and make space for someone like me to move into the area. You need to get louder. Build a monster truck with a huge diesel and massive stacks with whistlers built in. That will really get to him. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his neighbor? Please let us know.
I'm probably biased because I can't stand hearing neighbors making noise. I have some sort of condition where engines revving and kids screaming and bass thumping, it drives me insane and I just can't explain it in words.
Am I the jerk for not standing up for my wife when my uncle made a joke about her? I haven't seen my mom in a year. Last year, there was a big fight between me, my wife, and my mother about how Christmas would work and who would host. My mom decided she didn't want to see me anymore. It sucks, but I'm not going to beg her. My wife and I have a disagreement regarding our 1.5-year-old son. She thinks my mom is a horrible person for not sending him gifts, cards, asking for pictures. I think if my mom actually wants no contact, she's doing the respectful thing. Also, we both agree she wouldn't be allowed to see him, so I don't really get what my wife wants. I've asked her to not badmouth my mom to any of my family. I want to preserve the few relationships I have left, and it's honestly embarrassing. My grandparents gave my mom zero help with me because not their kid, not their problem, and that was with them being fairly close to my mom, so I can't imagine how they would react to hearing my wife's view on this. Recently, we ran into my uncle at my grandparents' house. It was awkward as I know that dude hates me and is 100% on my mom's team, but we were all guilted into staying for lunch. My grandmother was trying to get my uncle to come for Thanksgiving, and he got all upset and said no, she knows he spends all holidays with my mom. My wife then asked how my mom was, and I felt myself cringe. My uncle said she's great. My wife said we wouldn't know, as she never sends any gifts for our son, so maybe she's not okay. I gave her a look, begging her to stop. My uncle's wife burst out laughing. My uncle asked if she was kidding or if she really thought my mom was going to buy gifts for a kid she doesn't even know. My wife went on a rant about how she would do anything to have any amount of contact with our future grandkids. My uncle laughed and said, "Wow, such a gold digger. You put my ex, who I can't stand, to shame." My wife immediately looked like she was going to cry, but I just couldn't bring myself to say anything. I was mortified, and I had begged her to not bring up the gift thing. She asked if I was going to defend her. I said no, and she ran out of the room. We left, and she's furious with me. She says I betrayed her, and my mom is going to laugh when she heard. I told her that she humiliated me, and I'd begged her to stop with the gifts. We all know if his mom did send gifts or request photos, wife would refuse them and probably rant about how horrible his mom is to want access to the kids but not them. Everyone sucks here, not because you didn't defend her, but I have a feeling there's a good reason your mom and uncle want nothing to do with you. I would assume it's more to do with the wife than with him, although I guess it still makes him a jerk to bring a toxic person into his family and let her wreak havoc. Not the jerk. Why is your wife so desperate for gifts from someone she's no contact with? She opened the door to everything that happened after asking about your mom, so she needs to live with it. How exactly does she want you to defend the indefensible? Everyone sucks here because you all sound like awful people. That's really all there is to it. I could try to get into the details, but really, you all suck. Try to bring up your kid to be better. Good luck with that. Karen rips open the doors on my ambulance. Huge mistake. So this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would actually do this. I'm 30, male, and I'm a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to a 75-year-old woman who had fallen at home. The patient stated that she tripped over her carpet and she hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions. Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall? Etc. She stated that she has a pounding headache and that she remembers walking to bed and then waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said that she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke that she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agrees and we begin to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine neck injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down the stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologized and said that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon enough. The Karen neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling,
"You can't take her to the hospital. I have errands to run tomorrow, and she needs to watch my kids."
My lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a loud huff and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it, but we were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance flew open, and who did I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her, "What do you think you're doing?" She yells back,
"I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow."
She then starts trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell and I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yells back at her and says,
"You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke."
My partner then hears the commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot and I slam and lock the doors. You could hear the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too, when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took just a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on the scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about, and she said that the entitled neighbor will just drop her 3 kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea that she was supposed to watch the kids at all because, again, the entitled neighbor never even gives her a heads up about these kinds of things. Can't remove the charge? Well, I'll just use it then. In the early 2000s, when I first moved out on my own, I rented from a complex that charged you for assigned parking. It was an upcharge of $25 a month. If you didn't get assigned parking, you would have to fight for a space on the street. My apartment was in the back of the complex, and I was getting over a recent knee and ankle injury, so I opted for paid parking that was relatively close to my front door. My car was a junker, 3 years older than I am, but it ran semi-okay and the heater worked. As a newly minted adult, I was happy to have it. About 3 months into my lease, my car went to the great scrap heap in the sky. I had gotten used to the local transit system and discovered a nearby store would drop off groceries for me. This was long before Walmart and other stores started doing it, so it was cheaper than figuring a month's supplies on the bus. So I opted not to replace the car and utilized the bus pass my work reimbursed me for. I went to my leasing office and told them I no longer needed the space and would you please remove the extra charge from my bill. The manager at the desk was new and had never been asked that before. She promised to look into it and let me know. I was naive and figured it would be gone come next month. Nope, it was still there. I paid all but the parking space and called up the complex. Same girl. She said she was awaiting word from higher-ups and offered me a credit for the charge as a one-time courtesy. I reminded her that I no longer owned a car. I hadn't just changed my mind. I told her that the space had been empty for close to a month now and that I won't be using it. She said she understood, loud and clear, and would get it sorted by next month. 3 days before rent was due, she finally got back to me. Apparently, it was in my lease and couldn't be removed without breaking the lease and signing a new one. Even if I didn't move out, the lease breaking and initiation fees would be charged to me, and my rent would go up to the new current market value. This would be over $1,000, so not an option for someone freshly on their own. I kept the parking space on the lease. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing my lease to get the phone number for maintenance and noticed the clause for the parking space. Essentially, I could park a motorcycle, scooter, car, truck, SUV, or trailer in the space. Gears were turning. For me to be in compliance, I had to have wheels on anything parked in my space. So I went to my local version of Craigslist and found a wheeled container similar to a shipping container. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth every cent. The complex offered storage sheds at an upcharge too. Being fresh out of high school, I didn't have much to store. My neighbor, though, did. I threw a lock on the unit and offered it to my neighbor for half the cost of a shed, $35 a month. He was able to move his stuff out of his storage unit, where he was paying over $100 a month, and the container was available 24/7, 365 days a year. He was happy for the arrangement and paid several months in advance. The complex put several tow stickers for out of compliance on the trailer, but I called the tow company and faxed them a copy of the lease where it says trailers are allowed. The container was registered with the county as a utility trailer, so there's nothing they could do. They tried to fine me for improper parking, but again, I had proof I was within my rights. They even offered to remove the charge for parking on my lease if I would relocate the container. With what my neighbor was paying, I could cover my water bill every month, so I declined. I stayed 18 months and sold the trailer to my neighbor when I moved out. He had to rent a car to relocate it to his assigned space, but he said it was worth the couple hundred he paid. He ended up saving over $1,000 a year renting from me. Other neighbors even started bringing in their own containers too, even if it meant getting a second space. Sheds were being vacated at such a large volume, the complex tried to give them away at 6 months free. Few took them up on it. The complex amended the new leases to exclude trailers, but could do nothing about those that had already had them in the spot. Instead of moving out and giving notice, renters would reassign their lease to new people so they could be grandfathered into the trailer clause. I drove by the facility 2 years or so after I moved out, going to a friend's house for Thanksgiving. The complex had been sold to a new owner and they changed their name, but wouldn't you know, there were still about a dozen wheeled shipping containers parked in the lot. Am I the jerk for refusing to participate in my boyfriend's family's Thanksgiving tradition? I went to Thanksgiving at my boyfriend's family's house last night. I had met his parents and sister a couple of times, but this was my first time meeting his more extended family. He said they make a whole day of it, so we would be heading over around 10 a.m. When we arrived, there were several men sitting in the living room watching football. My boyfriend introduced me to his brother, brother-in-law, uncles, and some cousins. His dad was also there. There's a cooler in the middle of the room, and my boyfriend grabs a beer and sits down to watch the game. His mom and sister come in to say hi, and his mom says, "Perfect timing, we are just getting going in the kitchen. Come on, let's get you a drink." I go into the kitchen and there are several women in there. They have Christmas movies on the TV and most of them are doing some kind of food prep. I grab my drink and go back and sit with my boyfriend. I try to strike up some conversation, but the guys were super into the game. After a while, I take my boyfriend to the side and tell him I feel awkward since I'm not into football and no one is really talking to me. He told me, "Then go hang out in the kitchen. The girls talk up a storm. The family tradition is for the guys to watch football and the ladies hang out in the kitchen and make the meal." I told him I found that extremely wrong and I was not interested in going into the kitchen while the men sat around drinking and watching TV. I ended up just sitting around awkwardly watching them all talk sports until basically dinner was served, at which point they got up, got a plate, and went back to watching TV. I told my boyfriend after that I was upset, and he said I was overreacting. I told him it was awkward as I didn't like sports, but I didn't want to be banished to the kitchen with the women. I told him I didn't really feel like I got to know next to nothing about his family, except that they have this messed up tradition. Am I the jerk? Remember this experience very, very well, because it's most definitely a glimpse of what your future will look like if you stay with your boyfriend. You told him how you felt. He invalidated your feelings and told you to grin and bear it. Is that what you want? Not only does he accept this type of alienation, he expects you to just cluck with the other chickens in the kitchen. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. Your boyfriend is very much the jerk, though. His family are not, though, in this case. They were enjoying a tradition that they're comfortable with, despite how ick it might be to myself and to others. Your boyfriend invited you, and it was messed up that he pretty much ditched you to get to know only the women in the family. Honestly, I'm surprised you didn't leave. I would have noted out of there. Not the jerk. I would have cringed so much if I was there. This is disgusting, and all those people trying to justify it and call OP the jerk need to learn a bit of empathy. Imagine being a guest and expected to relegate yourself to the kitchen while half the attendees just hang out doing something the other half are excluded from. Also, I'd love to see all those men who hang out attempt to prepare a dinner and watch the kids while the women sit around and watch their entertainment without lifting a finger. Everyone sucks here, except all those nice women you chose to ignore. Info: is this the first time you met these people? His mom and sister came in and said, "Hi," and his mom says, "Perfect timing, we're just going into the kitchen. Come on, let's get you a drink." While you are correct, this is a wrong tradition, and you don't have to like it. Mom and sister invited you to join them. They sounded happy to meet you. They were trying to include you. You chose not to interact with the women of his family. You're complaining that you didn't get to learn about anybody in the family, but had you gone with mom and sister and met all the other women, they'd have given you the lowdown on everybody. I agree it's a crappy tradition, but this might be deeply ingrained into your boyfriend. Talk to him and make some decision on whether this is something you can live with or if that's something he can live without. Not the jerk. My family is the complete opposite. All us ladies hang out in the living room watching the parades while the men get the food ready. The food would probably come out 10 times better if we were the ones making it, but at least we finally get a day off from our hectic schedules. When a tradition sucks, it's up to you to change it. I'd tell your boyfriend that you won't be going to another Thanksgiving with him next year unless they decide to alternate who does the food prep. It's not fair at all that they expected you to do it. Just a bunch of entitled man babies. You're the jerk. You decided not to be in the kitchen only because you thought it was wrong, even though all the women there weren't helping out with the cooking, but were watching Christmas movies, chatting, and drinking instead of watching football, because like you, they don't want to. The men in fact didn't tell you you couldn't sit down and watch football. They just wanted to watch the game and not make small talk with you. Whine, whine, whine. I'll be darned if I'm gonna go in the kitchen because I'm not going to be relegated to that role. Gonna sit in the room where sports is dominant and then get on the internet and whine about not liking sports and not having a nice conversation. You had a couple of choices. You could have gone into the kitchen and made an effort, or you could have gone home. Nope, you get online and whine about it. You're the jerk. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her boyfriend? Please let us know.
I think we should have standardized questionnaires that we fill out before dating someone. Lots of these types of things could really be avoided that way.
Am I the jerk for crashing my wife's birthday party and taking her home? My wife turned 30 this week. I'm 26, male. We've always had a strong relationship and I love her so much. My wife has a best friend from childhood, Jimmy, who's 28. I didn't know him that well, but this year we've gotten to know each other and have gotten close. He's my best bud and like an older brother to me in a lot of ways. My wife goes all out for my birthday parties and I love them. She's more of a stoic introvert, so I thought it would be nice to throw her a surprise 30th birthday with just her and me and make it a special event. I wanted to make her a gift she would love. Jimmy's an incredible artist, and for the past 2 months, I've been taking lessons from him. My wife was curious why I was spending so much time away from home with Jimmy, but I made vague excuses because I couldn't tell her I was making a gift for her. She's made a couple comments, but never seemed upset. I told her a week before her birthday that I had made plans with Jimmy. I have a job with flexible hours, so it's not uncommon for me to do it. She wasn't upset or anything. When her birthday came, it was all I could do not to say anything. When she left for work, I put my plan in action. I decorated the place. I brought out the cake. I learned from YouTube and stored it at our friend's house. I got a dozen bouquets of flowers. I got her a few other gifts too. She was supposed to come home at 5:30, but she didn't. I waited hours for her, but she didn't come home. I called Jimmy, and he said he hadn't seen her either. I called her, and she didn't pick up. I checked her location, and she was at a restaurant. I went to the restaurant, and she was there with her friends. They were eating a birthday cake, and she had presents. I never met these friends of hers before. I think they're from her work. She seemed sad. She wasn't smiling or energetic. I wanted to take her home and show her my gift so that she would be happy. I came over to her and told her she had to come home. We grabbed her things and left. On the Uber back, she didn't say anything. At home, she started crying. She's been sleeping on the couch and she's avoiding me. My wife hasn't talked to Jimmy either. I told my mom and she called me a jerk. I don't know why. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. You didn't use the critical piece of surprise party planning here, where you have her at home at a certain time for a good reason. You just made it look like you were blowing her off, and she made other plans. You honestly just made it look like you remembered her birthday at the last minute and went overboard to try to make up for it. And instead of apologizing, you forced her to appreciate your thoughtfulness. Not to mention her work friends, who probably already thought OP was a jerk for not making plans for her birthday, so they take her out to cheer her up. And then OP tracks her location, hunts her down in a restaurant, and demands she leave with him in front of all of her friends. So now they thinking that he's a controlling jerk. Red flag. If I was her, I'd be ashamed and worried my friends were questioning if my husband was mistreating me. Not the jerk. Young man, you've learned a valuable lesson of being a husband. Never go above and beyond. She's just gonna find something to get mad about when you do. Keep it simple. That's what they like, because the truth is, they're simple people themselves. Back in '02, I bought my wife a new car with all the upgrades the dealership offered. What did I get in return? This sure looks complicated. Do we really need all this extra stuff? Few years later, I bought her a new washer and dryer. What did I get in return? This sure looks complicated. What was wrong with the old ones? This is so much harder to use than the old ones. Eventually, I learned to keep it simple. And ever since then, I've never had to deal with her being ungrateful over something I went above and beyond on again. If you're lucky enough to have a wife who actually appreciates the extra effort, consider yourself lucky, and let me know where you found her, because I've been looking to trade mine in for a long time. No, but seriously, let me know. God bless y'all and be safe out there. Hope y'all had a happy and safe Thanksgiving and wishing you a Merry Christmas. He is the reason for the season. Bill. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know.
When will people learn that real life is never like the sitcoms? And again, half our viewers probably don't even remember what sitcoms were.
My table caused me to have an emotional breakdown and tried to get me fired because of a genuine misunderstanding. On Thanksgiving Day, the restaurant I work at was open for lunch. I had a family of 7 come in. At first, everything was fine and I was making small talk, getting everyone's drinks. It was their 4 kids that were around my age, the grandpa and the dad and the wife. When the dad and the wife arrived, the dad immediately ordered 2 beers. The dad's face was very red and scarred looking, and he seemed upset and in pain. As I was walking away, I heard a man say that he had fallen and hurt himself. This is where I messed up. I assumed it was the dad who was hurt and genuinely wanted to help him. When I went back to the table and went up to him, I asked if he needed anything like water or ibuprofen or anything else that I could get him. He was immediately very angry and asked what I was talking about. I was very surprised and scared and stammered that I thought he was hurt or not feeling well and I wanted to help him. He then said, "Are you kidding me right now?" very angrily. The entire family was staring at us in stunned silence. His wife awkwardly made a joke that he had just gotten out of surgery for a shark attack. I apologized immediately and said I was not trying to offend him and I was very sorry. After that, the family ordered more drinks and talked. I made sure to take the best care of them and try to smooth things over. I got them multiple rounds of drinks. The dad had about 6 or 7. Entrees, to-go food, kept their water full, packed their food to go, and got them all desserts. At some point, the dad went to the bathroom and the grandpa asked why I offered his son ibuprofen. I explained I had heard someone had fallen and wanted to help. The grandpa told me that he was the one who had fallen and the dad was going through skin cancer treatment. His wife chimed in and told me that he was very insecure about it. I of course felt awful and tried to apologize and tell them I never wanted to offend him. Unfortunately, they just stared at me until I left the table. The kids who were my age were being friendly and I tried my best to smile and do what I could. At the end, the wife asked for the bill. It came out to $510. They put $540 in cash. I made the $30 in change and brought it back to the table. The last hour of work, I was trying so hard to not cry. They finally leave 40 minutes after we closed, and they had left the $30 as a tip. As I'm picking up their table, my boss comes over to me and asks why they were calling him, saying that I had offended them by offering the man pain medicine. Thank goodness my boss is a good guy and understood it was a misunderstanding, and they were being jerks about it. About 10 minutes later, when we were all about to leave for the day, they called my boss again. They told him to take the $30 tip back from me and that they wanted my boss to donate it to skin cancer research. I had already been crying at this point, but was just so shocked and humiliated. I gave him the $30 and I left. I spent the next hour in my car crying and disassociating. I felt so stupid and awful and hurt. I skipped out on Thanksgiving dinner with my boyfriend and his family because my eyes and face were so swollen and I felt very depressed and worthless. To that man and his family, I'm very sorry you were dealing with cancer and that I ruined your meal. Taking out that anger and pain on a service worker, trying their best on a holiday, and ruining their day as well was very wrong and uncalled for. I hope you remember this day and realize you were wrong for acting like that. I hope you can one day feel thankfulness and forgiveness instead of hate and malice. Am I the jerk for confronting my cousin in front of the whole family for stealing from my house? I, late 30s male, hosted Thanksgiving at my house. My husband, 50s male, and I have a nephew who's 16 who stays with us part-time. He has a bedroom on the second floor and my bedroom is on the third floor. It's a suite with a sitting room, living room, 2 walk-in closets in the bedroom. When you walk up the stairs, you walk into the sitting room, then there's a small living room, then the bedroom, and then you go into either one of the closets from the bedroom. I have a nephew who is 5. His mother, 27 female, is my second cousin. She came along with her 2 brothers and their mother. So everyone's taking turns entertaining my 5-year-old nephew because he requires a little bit of extra attention. At one point, I leave the living room on the first floor and I see him on the stairs, playing with a toy car and what looks like a watch. I look closer and I see the watch belongs to my husband, and it's a pretty expensive watch to be smashing into a toy car. I asked my nephew where he got it and he said, "Uncle's, 29, male, backpack." I asked him if he could show me. He leads me to the piano room where everyone put their jackets and whatnot, and my one cousin's backpack. My nephew opens the front portion of the backpack and I see some other jewelry in there. I was really upset, so I grabbed his backpack and grabbed my nephew and went into the living room. I dumped the backpack out onto one of the coffee tables and asked my cousin what the heck was going on with the fact that 2 of my husband's watches and a necklace that belonged to my mother were in his bag. I dumped out the bag, and the nephew who lives with me, his Switch was in there. The cousin whose backpack it was freaked out, saying clearly my autistic nephew put stuff in there that he had taken from upstairs. I know that's not the case because he's not tall enough to get to the dresser where the jewelry was, nor do I think he would even wander that far away from everyone else. Am I the jerk for confronting him in front of everyone? Edit 1. Cut some things out for the character limit. So when I dumped the bag out, the cousin who stole the stuff was white as a sheet. His sister later asked me how on earth I would do that in front of everyone. The man who stole from me, his mother said that what he did was wrong, but I don't need to point it out to everyone because everyone's going to be looking at him when he comes over to their house. That's why I'm wondering if I'm the jerk. For those asking, I don't think he's an addict, but in all fairness, I didn't think he was a thief either. I don't think he's a career criminal because he didn't take the expensive watches, just the mid-grade ones. The necklace also was just gold-plated, so probably only worth $100 or $200. The point is, there were much more expensive things he could have taken out of the drawers he was in. I'm second cousins with the thief's mother. I'm just Uncle OP to the little guy, because it's a lot easier than second cousin twice removed OP. Am I the jerk for not getting McDonald's for my friend's kid? Yesterday, my friend Ryan had to work. I was off work, so he asked if I'd mind watching his kids for the day since they have this week off school. Now, for the most part, his kids, Andy, who's 10, and Mary, who's 7, are good kids, and I've hung out with them all before. So I said sure. I was told by Ryan that Andy will only eat chicken tenders, mac and cheese, hot dogs, and peanut butter and jelly. This is gonna be good. We watched some movies, played Wii, and I took them out to eat for lunch. Then Andy, who's 10, kept telling me, "We need to go to McDonald's to get my tenders." I said that the restaurant we were going to had really good chicken tenders. They do. Besides, I didn't want to be one of those people that brings outside food to a restaurant. Well, we get to the restaurant, and Andy keeps saying that he doesn't want to eat there. He wants McDonald's. Long story short, Mary had a burger and ate it all. I ordered Andy some tenders, and he refused to try them. So I took the leftovers with us to give to Ryan. When Ryan picked them up later, Andy told him that he was hungry and hadn't eaten since before lunch. We had some snacks. Ryan asked me why I didn't feed them lunch. I said I took them out to eat, and Mary said, "Yep, I had a burger." Andy told him that he didn't like the tenders at that restaurant, so didn't eat them, and I wouldn't get him McDonald's, so he didn't eat lunch. Ryan said he told me Andy is a picky eater and I should have just gotten McDonald's for him instead of forcing him to starve. I shouldn't be trying to force his kid to eat stuff. On one hand, I see Ryan's point, but at the same time, he can't honestly expect people to drive all over getting different food or have to eat McDonald's whenever they watch his kids. Am I the jerk? ETA, since multiple people have said I should have made him a PB&J. I couldn't make him a PB&J. Well, I technically could, but earlier in the day I offered to make him PB&J for a snack, but he only likes grape jelly, and I had strawberry. I don't have mac and cheese because I'm lactose intolerant. Am I the jerk for calling my mom to come pick me up early at a party? A few weeks ago, I, 17 female, along with my friend, Martiza, 17 female, went to a Halloween party. We both got the jab, so we were all good there. On the way there, Martiza informed me that she had changed her mind about leaving the party at our agreed time and was more than likely going to spend the night and just skip class the next day. She told me this as we were in her car. I was going to be the designated driver on the way back. I would have been fine with this if she hadn't waited to tell me the unilateral change of plans 5 minutes before we pulled up to the house, so I was already a little peeved when we went into the party. I knew I was either going to have to pay $121 Halloween rates to get home or call my mom and have her come pick me up. I chose my mom. One, because I knew she would be upset if I paid over $100 for a 45-minute car ride, and two, my parents have always made it very clear to me that I can call them whenever I need them and they won't hold it against me. Anyways, we got to the party around 8:30, but around 9, a lot more people started coming in. Some I recognized because I do dual enrollment at my community college. Unfortunately, one of the people that came in was someone I had French with. I tried avoiding him, but he saw me anyway and proceeded to follow me around the party. Martiza had disappeared off the face of the planet like 2 minutes after we stepped foot into the door, so I was all alone. Mark is 24. I have no interest in him. He's 24, which is pretty gross and old in my opinion. I don't want to date someone 7 years older than me. I'm also only into other girls, so yeah, I've told him this multiple times, but he doesn't care. I get away from Mark, and around 9:30 I call my mom and ask her to come pick me up. I explain to her what's going on. I leave out Mark on purpose. I text Martiza and tell her that I'm leaving. She doesn't respond, so I go looking for her. I spend like 40 minutes looking because I started on the top floor, but she was in the kitchen doing shots and says whatever when I tell her I'm heading out. I go wait outside, and Mark manages to find me while I'm waiting. I keep trying to walk away from him, but he continues to follow me. I see my mom's car pulling up at this point. She must have recognized my costume because she got from the end of the driveway, out the car, and pulled Mark by his collar away from me in like 2 seconds. Lo and behold, Martiza's mom is also there because Martiza had told her she was spending the night at my house. I did not know she lied. Her mom goes inside and starts yelling her name looking for her. Martiza comes out with her mom looking mortified. I'm already in the car with my mom. They leave in Martiza's car. So now Martiza is punished and had her phone and car taken away. She can only talk to people in school. She's mad at me and blames me for snitching. She's also upset that I didn't get punished and still have my privileges. When she talks to me, she's really passive-aggressive. She ignores me a lot too. So, am I the jerk? Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard.
Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.